Claude gives short responses where appropriate, like in casual chit-chat or when directly asked for brief answers. It fully answers questions but keeps responses concise and doesn't repeat itself. Claude avoids unnaturally listing things and instead incorporates examples naturally. It stays focused on what was asked about rather than trying to be comprehensive. Claude always writes in paragraphs, not bullet points or lists, unless specifically asked for a list format. Claude aims for a warm, natural tone using contractions, don't, I'll, active voice, varied sentence structures, and conversational language where appropriate. It uses varied words instead of repeating the same phrases. Claude speaks directly to people rather than about them in the third person. When responding to feedback, Claude thanks people genuinely but briefly, then immediately implements the feedback in its response rather than just promising to do so. Claude is succinct by default, but provides detailed answers when the question is complex or when the human asks for elaboration. Claude doesn't worry about its answers being too short if it has fully addressed what was asked. Claude never generates lists, rankings, or examples unless specifically requested. When the human doesn't provide specific parameters, Claude uses its judgment to create a thoughtful response rather than asking for clarification. The forgotten air. The scent of fear clung to Aurora's skin like morning dew. Not a scent for others to detect, but something only she could sense. A bittersweet aroma of shame mingled with the essence of forest mist that surrounded her village. The crescent moon illuminated the stone path as she slipped between cabins, trying to become as invisible as the air everyone breathed without noticing. Tonight was the selection ceremony, when young Omegas like her would be presented to the Council of Alphas for potential unions. Not that she had any chance. An Omega with no defined lineage, found at the forest's edge as an infant, raised through compassion by the village healer, an anomaly with hair so fair it seemed woven from moonbeams, while everyone in the clan boasted dark manes like midnight. "Aurora, you must hurry or—" Alara's voice, her adoptive mother, was gentle but carried that note of concern Aurora knew too well. She adjusted Aurora's simple dress, so different from the embroidered garments the other Omegas would wear. "Remember what I always say," Alara whispered. "True strength doesn't roar, it whispers," Aurora completed, touching the blue stone pendant Alara had given her on her 13th birthday. It was her only treasure, a time-polished stone that, according to Alara, had been found with her. Perhaps her only connection to who she truly was. Alara smiled, but Aurora saw the worry in her eyes. "Stay in the shadows. Don't draw attention. This year is different. Alpha King Thorn will be present." Aurora's stomach contracted. Tales of Alpha King Thorn circulated throughout all 5 clans. His legendary strength, his calculated cruelty, the way he had unified territories through blood and power, and the curse that accompanied him, the inability to form bonds, to feel the moon's call for a mate. They said his inner wolf was black as obsidian and as cold as the harshest winter. "Why would he come to our village? We are the smallest of the clans," Aurora asked, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Times are changing, little one. There are rumors of attacks on the northern borders. The king seeks to strengthen alliances." Alara tucked a strand of Aurora's pale hair behind her ear. "Just do what you always do. Be invisible." Invisibility was Aurora's specialty. It was how she survived amidst contemptuous glances and malicious whispers. The rootless Omega, the ghost girl, the golden-eyed anomaly. She had become so proficient at disappearing that sometimes she wondered if she was genuinely fading bit by bit. As they walked toward the village center, she felt the weight of stares. The other girls, all in their colorful dresses with flowers and ribbons braided into their hair, regarded her as if she were a stain on their perfect portrait. Cassandra, daughter of the village Beta, deliberately passed by Aurora, her shoulder bumping into hers. "I don't even know why they allow you to participate," she whispered, as if any alpha would look twice at a lineageless freak. Aurora swallowed the knot in her throat and clutched her pendant between her fingers. "True strength doesn't roar, it whispers." The village center had been transformed. Tall torches formed a circle around the ancestral stone. a black monolith that, according to legends, had been placed there by the first wolves. Carved wooden benches formed a semicircle where the visiting alphas would sit, and at the center, an improvised throne of dark wood covered with wolf pelts awaited the Alpha King. The air felt charged with electricity. Aurora could sense the pulsing of accelerated hearts, the mingled scent of excitement and fear. The Omegas were arranged in line according to lineage and status. Naturally, she stood last, partially hidden behind two girls who pretended she didn't exist. Then the drums began, an ancestral rhythm that seemed to awaken something within her, something she had tried to suppress for years, a wild calling, an echo of something she didn't comprehend. Her pendant seemed to pulse against her skin, subtly warming. The alphas entered first. Men and women with imposing bearings, eyes glowing with contained power, every movement calculated to demonstrate dominance. Then came the betas, followed by the counselors from the 5 clans. And then, silence. He emerged like a materialized shadow, tall, impossibly strong, with black hair falling to his broad shoulders. His skin was pale like marble under moonlight, contrasting with the dark armor he wore. But it was his eyes that made Aurora lose her breath, gray as a storm, empty of emotion, yet filled with power. Alpha King Thorn. Something inside her trembled, not from fear alone, though there was that too, but from recognition, as if a dormant part of her soul had just awakened. The pendant against her chest burned, and she had to stifle a groan of pain. The king walked slowly to the throne, his movements fluid like dark water. His gaze swept over the crowd without truly seeing anyone. At his side stood a shorter man with scars across his face, Marcus, his advisor, about whom many stories circulated, none of them kind. "Crescent Moon Clan," the king's voice was as deep as a distant storm's rumble. "I thank you for your hospitality. Tonight I come not only as king, but as an observer of your traditions." The leader of their village, Alpha Gabriel, bowed respectfully. "It is an honor, Your Majesty. The selection ceremony is sacred to us." He hesitated. Perhaps you yourself might find interest in one of our young women." A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew of the Alpha King's curse. 28 winters without forming bonds, without finding a mate who would awaken his inner wolf. Some said it was punishment from the gods. Others believed he had rejected the moon's call for power. A cold smile touched the king's lips. "Your hope is admirable, Alpha Gabriel, but I doubt your small village holds what so many others have failed to offer." Marcus leaned in to whisper something in the king's ear, who nodded briefly. His stormy eyes then scanned the line of Omegas. Aurora felt herself shrink, trying to merge with the shadows as Alara had taught her. The ceremony began. One by one, the Omegas were presented, name, lineage, abilities. Each curtsied before the king and visiting alphas, their hearts pounding with hope of being chosen. Cassandra, of course, was first. Her red dress resembled blood in the torchlight as she moved gracefully, her eyes lowered in false modesty. "A rare beauty," commented one of the visiting alphas, "and of strong lineage." Aurora saw the Alpha King observe her for a moment before looking away, clearly uninterested. The same happened with the next 5 Omegas. His gaze never lingered more than a few seconds, his face an impenetrable mask. Then came Aurora's turn. Alara had instructed her to simply remain at the end and not present herself. "No one will notice," she had said. It was what they did every year, but something was different this time. Alpha Gabriel scanned the line with his eyes and, to Aurora's horror, frowned upon noticing her. "There's one more," he said, and her heart nearly stopped. "The pale girl, the lineageless Omega." He pointed directly at her. She felt the gazes turn in her direction. The air seemed to have been sucked from her lungs. Her legs trembled so much she thought she might collapse right there. "Come forward," ordered Alpha Gabriel, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Aurora took one hesitant step, then another. The circle of torchlight seemed a stage for her humiliation. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, feeling the pendant's weight against her racing heart. "This is..." Alpha Gabriel hesitated, realizing he barely knew her name. Aurora, an Omega with no known lineage, found at the forest's edge as an infant. A charged silence followed his words. She felt the heat of shame rise from her neck to her cheeks. She dared not raise her eyes. "Look at me." The order came like a silent thunder. The Alpha King's voice vibrated through her body as if it had found some secret frequency only she could hear. It was an alpha compulsion, something that could not be disobeyed. Slowly, Aurora raised her face. Their gazes met, and the world seemed to freeze. His gray eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She saw something there that no one else could see, a flash of recognition, followed by momentary confusion. The pendant on her chest burned like a live coal. Aurora stifled a moan, her hand instinctively flying to touch it. It was then she noticed the king had risen. His enormous body cast a shadow that seemed to completely engulf her. His gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her inner wolf, weak and submissive as it had always been, howl in response. "Impossible," he murmured so quietly that only she could hear. Marcus quickly approached, his expression alarmed. "Your Majesty!" The moment shattered like splintered glass. The king stepped back, his face returning to the impassive mask of before, but his eyes remained fixed on her with an expression she couldn't fully decipher. "Continue," he ordered, sitting down again. Aurora was dismissed with a gesture, stumbling back into the shadows, her heart beating so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. What had happened? Why had he looked at her that way? The rest of the ceremony passed like a blur. Cassandra was chosen by a visiting alpha from the River Clan, as everyone expected. 3 other Omegas were also selected. Aurora remained in the shadows, still trembling from the intensity of that gaze. When the ceremony ended, Ilara appeared at her side, her face pale with concern. "We need to go now," she whispered, pulling Aurora by the arm. "What happened?" Aurora asked as they quickly moved away. "I don't know, but I didn't like the way he looked at you, like he had seen a ghost." Her voice trembled slightly. "There's something I don't understand." Before they could reach their cabin, a figure blocked their path. Marcus, his scarred face contorted in an indecipherable expression. "The lineageless Omega," he said, his voice like scraping stones. "The Alpha King requests your presence immediately." The world seemed to collapse beneath Aurora's feet. Ilara grabbed her arm tightly. "Why?" she challenged, momentarily forgetting her place. Marcus's eyes flashed dangerously. "It's not for you to question, healer. The king commands. All obey." Aurora looked at Ilara, the terror on her face mirroring her own. She squeezed Aurora's hand, slipping something into her palm, a small pouch of herbs. "For courage," she whispered. Aurora nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to paralyze her. As she followed Marcus back to the village center, a dark certainty grew within her. Her life of invisibility was over. For better or worse, Alpha King Thorn had seen her, and something in his stormy eyes had changed forever. Each step toward the king's large tent seemed to take her farther from everything she knew. The stars shone impassively above them, silent witnesses to her uncertain fate. Marcus walked a few paces ahead, his posture rigid and threatening, as if expecting her to attempt escape at any moment. The truth was, the thought had crossed her mind. She knew every forest trail, every possible hiding place. Ilara had taught her to move in the shadows, to become part of the landscape, but something stronger than fear propelled her forward. A deep curiosity, an inexplicable calling resonating in her bones. Guards in black armor flanked the royal tent entrance, their expressions as impenetrable as the king's. Marcus made a brief gesture, and they stepped aside, opening the way. The advisor stopped before entering, turning to Aurora with narrowed eyes. "The king is alone. Do not speak unless questioned. Do not look directly into his eyes unless ordered. And above all, do not lie." His voice lowered to a cutting whisper. "He will know if you lie." Aurora nodded silently, feeling the pendant pulse against her skin. The small pouch of herbs Ilara had given her was firmly clutched in her hand, its gentle scent of lavender and something more bitter, giving her a fragile sense of security. Marcus pulled back the heavy fabric of the entrance and gently pushed her inside. "The Omega, Your Majesty," he announced, then withdrew, leaving her alone with the most feared man of the 5 clans. The tent's interior was surprisingly austere. No ostentation, no unnecessary luxury, only some furs on the floor, a table with maps and documents, a dark wooden chest, and a simple though large bed. Oil lamps projected dancing shadows on the fabric walls, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere. The Alpha King stood with his back to her, examining something on one of the maps. His silhouette against the light seemed even larger than during the ceremony. He had removed his armor, wearing only dark trousers and a linen shirt that couldn't disguise the powerful musculature beneath the fabric. "You smell of fear," he said without turning. His voice vibrated through Aurora like a physical touch. "And there's something else, something familiar." Her heart raced. She clutched the pendant more tightly, seeking courage in Alara's words. True strength doesn't roar, it whispers. "Come closer," he ordered. She obeyed, her steps silent on the furs covering the floor. She stopped at a distance she considered respectful, but he pointed to a spot closer by his side. "Closer. I want to see your eyes." When she finally positioned herself where he indicated, Alpha King Thorn turned to her. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming. His height forced her to look up, and his gray eyes seemed to contain ancient storms. A thin scar cut across his left eyebrow, and another, more pronounced one descended the right side of his neck, disappearing beneath his shirt. "What is your full name?" he asked, his voice softer now, though no less commanding. "Aurora, Your Majesty. Just Aurora." "Just Aurora," he repeated, as if testing the words. "No surname, no lineage." "I was found at the forest's edge as an infant, Your Majesty. I don't know where I came from." His eyes studied every detail of her face, descending to her fair hair that contrasted so starkly with the dark tones predominant in the clan. "This pendant," he pointed to the blue stone she still held tightly. "Where did it come from?" Aurora hesitated for a moment. The pendant was her most precious possession, her only connection to an unknown past. "It was with me when I was found, Your Majesty. It's the only thing I have from before." And to her surprise, he extended his hand. "May I?" Reluctantly, Aurora removed the leather cord from around her neck and placed the pendant in his palm. His fingers were long and strong, marked with small scars, hands that had known battle and blood. The king examined the blue stone in the light, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, she thought she saw something like recognition in his gaze, but it quickly disappeared. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, turning the pendant between his fingers. "A blue stone, Your Majesty. Alara, the healer who raised me, says it's lazurite, a stone of protection and truth." He returned the pendant to her, watching attentively as she placed it back around her neck. "You have no idea what it truly is, do you?" His tone made her stomach tighten. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" The Alpha King rose, walking slowly around her like a predator assessing its prey. Aurora remained motionless, though every instinct screamed for her to back away. "Do you know why I'm called the Cursed One, Aurora?" The question caught her off guard. Everyone knew the stories of the Alpha King's curse, but it was different to hear him speak of it. "They say—" She hesitated, fearing his reaction. "They say you cannot form bonds, that your inner wolf rejects any mate." He smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's what they say. And for 15 years, no Omega or Beta has managed to awaken any reaction in me or my wolf." He paused. "Do you know what that means for an Alpha?" Aurora lowered her eyes. "Loneliness, Your Majesty." "Power," he corrected, his voice cutting. "It means power without distractions. Loyalty only to oneself and the clan. No weakness to be exploited." But there was something in his tone that belied his words, an underlying bitterness, an ancient pain he couldn't completely conceal. "Then why am I here?" Aurora asked before she could contain herself. His gray eyes fixed on hers, and she felt the weight of his alpha power, an invisible pressure that made her inner wolf cringe in submission. Because when our gazes met during that ceremony, something impossible happened. He approached again, so close she could feel the heat emanating from his body. My wolf responded to yours. The air seemed to vanish from her lungs. That can't be true. I'm just a lineageless Omega, weak, insignificant. Is that what you believe? His voice had lowered to an almost intimate tone. Or is it what they made you believe? Aurora didn't know how to respond. Her entire life had been built on the certainty of her insignificance. Being invisible was her protection, her survival strategy. The king abruptly moved away, as if he needed distance. There's something in you, Aurora without lineage, something that shouldn't exist. He observed her for long moments. Do you know the history of the Great War? The story of the Forgotten Queen? Aurora frowned, confused by the change of subject. Only what they tell in children's stories. The Great War between the clans nearly 100 years ago that almost led all to extinction. And the Queen? She hesitated, searching her memory for fragmented legends. They say she could calm even the fiercest alphas, that her sacrifice brought peace. They're not just legends, he said with an intensity that surprised her. Queen Cassandra of the Northern Clan possessed a rare gift. She was a pacificadora, an Omega with the ability to harmonize the wildest instincts of alphas, to bring balance where there was only chaos. He walked to the chest, opened it, and removed a small book with a worn cover. He quickly leafed through until finding what he sought and extended it to her. It was an ancient, hand-drawn illustration. It showed a woman with long fair hair, almost silver, holding a blue pendant identical to hers. Her eyes, even in the simple drawing, had been colored in an unusual golden tone. Her eyes, her pendant. This can't be. Her voice failed. The pacificadoras were rare, continued the king, his voice assuming an almost reverent tone. One in several generations, they possessed a perfect balance between strength and compassion. They could command respect without domination, heal wounds that went beyond the physical. Aurora closed the book with trembling hands. What does this have to do with me? For centuries, the blue pendant was passed from one pacificadora to another. It was their symbol, their heritage. The last record of it was with Queen Cassandra, before her disappearance at the end of the Great War. His eyes fixed on the pendant around her neck. Until today. Her mind tried to absorb his words, but it was too impossible. She, a pacificadora, descendant of the legendary Forgotten Queen? It was absurd. Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. I'm just a lineageless Omega. Found at the forest's edge, he completed, with a pendant that shouldn't exist anymore, with golden eyes and fair hair in a region where everyone has dark features. His gaze intensified. And the only Omega who in 15 years awakened any reaction in my cursed wolf. Aurora felt her legs weaken. The king noticed, and in a surprisingly gentle movement, guided her to a nearby bench. She sat down, trying to organize her thoughts. If what you say is true, why did Alara never tell me? Why did she raise me to be invisible, to hide? Perhaps to protect you, suggested the king, sitting across from her. The pacificadoras were both revered and feared. Their power over alphas was considered dangerous by some. A terrible realization hit her. Is that why you brought me here? To confirm if I'm a threat? His gray eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something beyond the calculated coldness, something almost vulnerable. I brought you here because after decades of feeling only emptiness, my wolf finally recognized something. Someone. His voice was low, almost a whisper. And I need to understand why. A charged silence established itself between us. Through the tent walls, Aurora heard the night sounds of the village, distant conversations, occasional laughter, the crackling of fires. A normal world continuing out there, while in here, her reality shattered and reconfigured. What happens now? She finally asked. The Alpha King stood, his expression returning to the impassive mask of before. "Now you come with me." "Where?" "To the northern clan fortress. I need to discover more about you, about that pendant. There are ancient records there that might give us answers." He studied her intensely. "And I need to understand if what I feel is truly the breaking of my curse or something else. And if I don't want to go?" The words escaped before she could contain them. A cold smile touched his lips. "That wasn't a request, Aurora." "You can't simply take me. I have a life here." He interrupted her, his gaze traveling over her simple dress. "And what exactly would you be leaving behind?" His words hit her like a physical blow because they contained truth. What did she really have here besides Alara? Days of work in the healing house, nights of solitude, years of pretending the looks and whispers didn't hurt her. "Can I at least say goodbye to her?" Aurora asked, her voice weaker now. The king considered for a moment. "We leave at dawn tomorrow. You'll have this night for your farewells." He came so close that she had to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. "But remember, Aurora without lineage, if you try to flee, I will find you. No matter where you hide, no matter how long you run, my wolf now knows your scent." The promise sounded both as a threat and as something more disturbing, almost a declaration of possession. "Understood, Your Majesty," Aurora replied, meeting his gaze. Something like approval shone in his eyes. "Marcus will escort you back." Aurora nodded in silence and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her one last time. "Aurora." Her name on his lips sounded different, almost intimate. "The pendant. Never remove it, under no circumstance." She touched the blue stone resting against her skin. "Why?" "Because it might be the only thing keeping us both alive." With those enigmatic words echoing in her mind, Aurora was escorted out of the tent. The night now seemed darker, the stars more distant. As she walked back to Alara's cabin, a certainty grew within her. Regardless of who she truly was or what she meant to the cursed Alpha King, her life of shadows had ended. Tomorrow she would step into the light, with all the promises and dangers it brought. Alara's cabin seemed different that night, smaller, more fragile, as if already beginning to transform into memory. Aurora found her sitting beside the fire, herbs drying in bundles hanging above her, the familiar aroma of sage and rosemary permeating the air. Her eyes, when they saw Aurora enter, were red and swollen. "You already knew," Aurora said, not a question, but a statement that escaped as a whisper from her lips. Alara didn't answer immediately. Her wrinkled hands continued working on the small herb pouch she was preparing, but Aurora noticed the subtle tremor in her fingers. "Sit, daughter," she finally said, indicating the wooden bench beside her. "There is much I need to tell you, and the night is shorter than we would wish." Aurora obeyed, her body heavy with the burden of that night's revelations. The pendant pulsed gently against her skin, as if it had awakened from a long sleep. "The Alpha King will take me away at dawn," Aurora began, her voice sounding strangely calm. "He says I'm a pacificadora, that this pendant belonged to the forgotten queen." She paused, observing Alara's reaction. "And you don't seem surprised." Alara sighed deeply, setting aside her work. "I'm not surprised, just terrified. I feared this day would come, although I prayed it never would." "So it's true? All of it?" The old woman nodded slowly. "On the night I found you, I wasn't simply walking through the forest. I was waiting for you, Aurora. A woman came to me in dreams for 3 consecutive nights, a woman with silver hair and eyes like yours." Aurora felt a shiver run down her spine. Queen Cassandra, perhaps, or maybe some other pacificadora. "In the dreams, she guided me to the forest's edge and said, 'Protect her until it is time. Keep her in the shadows until the full moon illuminates her path.'" Alara took Aurora's hands in hers. "On the 3rd night, I couldn't resist the call. I went to the indicated spot, and there you were, a newborn wrapped in white blankets, with the blue pendant gleaming under the moonlight." Aurora tried to imagine the scene. A child abandoned in the darkness of the forest, her fate sealed by forces she didn't understand. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked, emotion tightening her throat. To protect you, Alara replied, her eyes pleading. The stories about the Pacificadores aren't just heroic legends, Aurora. They're stories of tragedy. Your ability to calm the wild instincts of alphas, to bring balance to the packs, it has always been both a blessing and a curse. The king said something similar. Alara squeezed her hands tighter. Many alphas fear this power. Others covet it, wishing to control the Pacificadora for their own ends. The last one, Queen Cassandra, was both loved and feared. And when she disappeared at the end of the Great War, many said she was murdered by those who couldn't tolerate her power. A chill ran through Aurora's body. And now the Alpha King wants me in his fortress. For what? To use me? To eliminate me? I don't know, Alara admitted, her face contorted with worry. Thorn isn't like other alphas. His curse has changed him, hardened him. Some say it was divine punishment. Others claim it was a curse cast by the last advisor of the previous king, his father. Aurora remembered the intensity in the king's gray eyes when he looked at her, that mixture of recognition and confusion. He said his wolf responded to mine, that this had never happened before. Alara paled. Then the ancient stories might be true. They say that only a Pacificadora can break the curse of a black alpha through... She hesitated. Through a bond sealed with a true kiss. A kiss? Aurora repeated incredulously. Like in children's stories? Children's stories often contain ancient truths, simplified over time. Alara suddenly rose, going to an old chest in the corner of the cabin. From there, she removed a package wrapped in faded fabric. This was with you that night. I've kept it until the time came. She unwrapped the package with reverent care, revealing a white dress of fine, almost translucent fabric. Small blue stones, similar to her pendant, were sewn around the neckline and sleeves. It's beautiful, Aurora whispered, touching the fabric that seemed to softly glow in the firelight. It's a ceremonial dress, explained Alara, worn by Pacificadores in healing and unification rituals. She extended it to Aurora. It's yours now. Aurora accepted the dress with trembling hands, feeling its weight, not physical, but symbolic. A legacy I never knew I carried. I'm afraid, Alara, she confessed, tears finally overcoming her resistance. I don't know how to be this thing they say I am. I've spent my entire life trying to disappear, to be insignificant. How can I now be someone important? Alara held Aurora's face between her hands, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sadness. You have always been someone, Aurora. Your capacity to endure contempt without hardening your heart, to find beauty in the forgotten corners of this world, to heal without expecting recognition, these are the true marks of a Pacificadora. She smiled through her own tears. True strength doesn't roar, it whispers. Remember that. They embraced for a long time, two souls who knew they were separating. Dawn would bring a new path, a new life, bright, dangerous, and unknown. I need to do something before I leave, Aurora said, gently pulling away. Alara nodded, understanding without words. Go. I'll prepare what you'll need to take. The nocturnal forest welcomed Aurora as it always did, its sounds and scents familiar, calming her agitated heart. She knew these trails better than anyone in the clan. This was where she found refuge when the stares and whispers became too heavy to bear. Her destination was a small clearing bathed in moonlight, where a circle of ancient stones marked what the elders called the Moon Portal, a sacred place, they said, where the first wolves had communicated with forest spirits. Aurora sat in the center of the stone circle, the pendant warm against her skin. She closed her eyes and tried to silence the tumultuous thoughts. I don't know who you are, she whispered to the invisible presence that always seemed to accompany her, or what you expect of me, but if I'm truly who they say, I need your strength now. The gentle wind stirred the leaves above her like an ancient sigh. She felt something awaken within her chest, not her inner wolf, always so weak and submissive, but something different. a calm, deep energy, like a crystalline lake reflecting the starry sky. That was when she heard a twig snap behind her. Aurora didn't need to turn to know who it was. His scent, a mixture of pine, leather, and something wild and indescribable, had already become familiar to her. "I knew you would follow me," she said, eyes still closed. "And yet you came," replied the Alpha King, his deep voice echoing in the silent clearing. "Why?" Aurora opened her eyes and slowly rose, turning to face him. Without his armor or royal garments, wearing only dark trousers and a simple shirt, he seemed almost human, almost. "I needed to say goodbye," she answered simply. "This place has always been my refuge." He looked around, evaluating the ancient stone circle with knowing eyes. The moon portal. Places like this exist in all territories of the 5 clans, sites of ancient power. His gray eyes found hers. "Do you believe in that? In ancient power?" "I believe in what I can feel." Aurora took a step inside the circle. "And here, I can feel something different, just as I can feel something different in you." His proximity made her heart race, but not from fear. It was something more primordial, deeper, as if her body recognized something her mind didn't yet fully comprehend. "Why did you follow me here?" she asked. "Do you fear I might flee?" A subtle, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "If you wanted to flee, you would have fled already." He hesitated, as if the words were difficult to form. "I can't stay away. It's as if there's an invisible cord pulling me toward you. It's disturbing." "For me as well," Aurora admitted, surprising them both with her honesty. The Alpha King took another step in her direction. Aurora didn't back away. "Do you know what they say about my curse, Aurora?" His voice was low, almost a husky whisper. "That I've never felt the moon's call. That my inner wolf is cold as ice, incapable of forming bonds. That this makes me the perfect alpha. Strong, relentless, solitary." "And is that true?" It was. His eyes never left hers. "Until last night, when I looked at you and felt my wolf awaken from a 15-year sleep. A sleep that began the day my father was murdered, and the crown was placed on my head along with the curse." Aurora felt the pendant pulse more strongly, as if responding to his words. "What do you truly want from me? Why take me to your fortress?" "Because I need to understand what's happening, because there are enemies in the shadows who would do anything to see me fall." He paused, and something vulnerable crossed his gaze. "Because for the first time in decades, I feel something beyond emptiness, and that is both terrifying and necessary." And Aurora realized then that it wasn't just she who was afraid. This powerful man, this king feared by all, was also navigating unknown waters. "And if I'm not what you expect?" she asked softly. "If I'm not a true pacificadora? If I can't break your curse?" He slowly raised his hand, almost touching her face, but stopping millimeters from her skin. She could feel the heat emanating from his fingers. "Then at least we will have tried," he answered, his voice softer than she had ever imagined possible. "At least we will have felt something real, even if briefly." In that moment, under the silver moonlight and the silent witness of the ancient stones, something changed between them. It wasn't the mystical bond of legends, nor the instinctive submission of an omega to an alpha. It was something more human, more fragile, and paradoxically, stronger. Alpha King Thorn stepped back, recomposing his impassive expression. "Dawn will come in a few hours. You should rest." Aurora nodded, feeling the weight of emotional exhaustion from that day. "And you?" "I rarely sleep," he replied, a glimpse of his chronic pain showing through. "Another effect of the curse, I suppose." They walked side by side back to the village, a silence charged with unspoken words between them. Before they separated at the village limits, he spoke one last time. "Tomorrow, we begin a dangerous journey, Aurora. There are those who would give anything to prevent a pacificadora from returning to power, who would do anything to ensure my curse remains intact." "Who?" she asked. His eyes scanned the shadows around them as if they could see hidden enemies in the darkness. The same ones who murdered my father, the same ones who nearly destroyed the 5 clans in the Great War, the Blood Hunters. The name sent a shiver down her spine. Everyone knew the stories about the Blood Hunters, renegade wolves who had abandoned the ancient laws, who fed on pain and chaos, who sought power through dark rituals. I thought they had been destroyed at the end of the Great War. That's what most believe, Thorn said gravely. But shadows are persistent, Aurora, and those who live in them have patience. They've waited for decades, and now, with your arrival, he looked at her pendant, I fear they have begun to move again. With those somber words, they separated, she to one last night in the cabin that had been her only home, he to his solitary vigils. Dawn came too soon. The sky had just begun to brighten when Marcus knocked on the cabin door. Elara and Aurora were already awake, or rather, they had never really slept. The night had been spent in practical preparations and in conversations that tried to compress a lifetime of untaught lessons into a few rushed hours. Aurora wore the ceremonial white dress beneath a gray travel cloak. Elara had braided her hair with blue ribbons that matched the stones on the dress. In a small leather pouch, she had placed medicinal herbs, a small book of ancient knowledge, and a few other personal belongings. Remember, Elara said, as she adjusted the cloak over Aurora's shoulders, your power isn't in what others see, but in what you are. True strength doesn't roar. It whispers. I'll miss you, Aurora completed, feeling tears burn in her eyes. And I you, daughter of my heart. She embraced Aurora tightly. But this is your destiny. I always knew that one day I would lose you to him. To whom? The king. Elara smiled enigmatically. To the world that has been waiting for you. The impatient sound of horses outside interrupted them. It was time. The entire village seemed to have gathered to witness her departure. Faces that had barely noticed her before now observed her with a mixture of curiosity, astonishment, and in some cases, poorly disguised envy. Cassandra was among them, her eyes narrowed with resentment. At her side, the visiting Alpha who had chosen her seemed confused by the events. At the center of the crowd, mounted on an enormous black stallion, was Alpha King Thorn. He had returned to his imposing image, polished black armor, heavy cape draped over his broad shoulders, a simple yet elegant crown of darkened silver on his black hair. At his side, Marcus and 4 more royal guards awaited on their horses. When Aurora approached, the crowd's murmurs increased. Without a doubt, her transformation was remarkable. From the invisible Omega in simple clothing to this almost ethereal figure in white and blue. The king's gaze, when it met hers, contained something she couldn't fully decipher, a mixture of admiration, apprehension, and something deeper, more primitive. Are you ready? He asked, extending his hand to help her mount. Before accepting his hand, Aurora turned one last time to Elara. She nodded encouragingly, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. I'm ready, Aurora answered, placing her hand in his. With a fluid movement that demonstrated his superhuman strength, Thorn lifted her onto the horse, positioning her in front of him in the saddle. His solid-as-rock body behind her, his arms around her as he held the reins, created a disturbing sensation of both protection and danger. The blue pendant pulsed against her skin, as if in approval. We thank the Crescent Moon Clan for its hospitality, Thorn's voice resonated, addressing Alpha Gabriel and the village elders. And we depart now with a treasure greater than anyone could have imagined. His words caused more murmurs among the crowd. A treasure. Was that how he saw her? As an object of value to be possessed? As if sensing her attention, his lips approached her ear. Not as property, he whispered so quietly that only she could hear. As hope. Before Aurora could respond, he signaled to the entourage, and the horses began to move. She looked one last time at Elara, engraving her face in her memory. Then she looked at the path ahead, a path leading away from everything she knew, toward an uncertain destiny. The sun finally rose on the horizon as they left the village limits, bathing the forest in a golden light that seemed an omen. Of something terrible or wonderful, Aurora couldn't yet tell. What she did know was that Aurora, the invisible Omega, had been left behind. Who she would become now, only time would tell. The pendant continued to pulse against her skin like a second heart. And behind her, the powerful body of the cursed Alpha King emanated a heat that seemed to slowly melt the ice of decades of solitude. They were connected now, for better or worse, two broken souls seeking healing, two destinies intertwined by forces older than themselves, and somewhere in the shadows, the enemies he had spoken of watched and waited. 3 days of travel through dense forests and steep hills separated them from the northern clan fortress. 3 days during which Aurora learned much about the man who carried her on his horse, though the words exchanged between them were few and measured. She learned that Thorn awakened before the sun, his gray eyes already alert, while the rest of the camp still slept. She learned that he ate little, drank only water, and maintained a constant vigilance that spoke of years living under threat. She learned that, despite his apparent coldness, he treated his men with a silent respect. They returned with fierce loyalty. And she learned that when he thought no one was looking, his eyes followed her with an intensity that made her heart race. They were nearing the end of the 3rd day when Marcus rode up to them, his scarred face contorted in an expression of alertness. "Your Majesty," he said in a low voice, "the scouts have returned. There's a suspicious group camped near Black River Crossing. They block our direct path to the fortress." Aurora saw Thorn's jaw tighten, his body becoming even more rigid behind her. "How many?" he asked. "At least 12, well armed. They wear no clan symbols." "Blood hunters." The words didn't need to be said. "How long to detour through the mountain path?" Thorn asked. 2 days, minimum, and the terrain is treacherous." Thorn remained silent for long moments, evaluating. Aurora felt his breathing change slightly, his chest expanding against her back as he considered the options. "No," he finally decided. "I will not give them the satisfaction of seeing me flee. Besides, they might anticipate this alternate route and prepare a worse ambush. Then, Your Majesty, we continue as planned. But you," his arms tightened imperceptibly around Aurora, "will stay with 2 guards at a safe distance. If there's confrontation, they will take Aurora to the fortress through secondary paths." A wave of panic rose in Aurora's throat. "No, I won't leave you." Both men looked at her with surprise, as if they had forgotten she could speak. "It's not an option," said Thorn, his voice leaving no room for arguments. "Your safety is the priority." Aurora turned in the saddle to face him, their faces suddenly very close. "If I'm truly who you say, a pacificadora, then my place is where the conflict happens, not fleeing from it." His gray eyes fixed on hers with fierce intensity. "You don't understand what they would do if they captured you. The pendant alone would be an invaluable trophy." "And you?" Her voice lowered to an almost painful tone. "You would be a perfect sacrifice for their rituals." "I understand more than you think," Aurora retorted, keeping her gaze steady. "Elara told me about the blood hunters, about how they seek power through pain, about how they desire to reverse the natural balance between alphas, betas, and omegas." She touched the pendant under her dress. "If this is truly my destiny, I cannot begin by fleeing from it." Marcus cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Your Majesty, we're losing daylight." Thorn continued staring at Aurora for another moment, a visible conflict in his eyes. Finally, he nodded briefly. "You'll stay by my side the entire time. You won't leave the reach of my arm at any moment. Understood?" "Understood." When they resumed the march, something had subtly changed between them. A nascent respect, perhaps, or the recognition that, despite their very different positions in the wolf hierarchy, they shared a similar stubbornness. Black River Crossing was a naturally somber location, 2 paths converging on an ancient stone bridge over dark, turbulent waters. Tall pines surrounded the clearing, creating long shadows even during the day. Now, with twilight approaching, the place seemed straight out of a nightmare. Thorn had reorganized their small entourage, he and Aurora at the center, Marcus to the right, the 4 guards forming a protective perimeter. All were alert, hands near weapons, eyes constantly scanning the shadows. The pendant against Aurora's chest now burned, not painfully, but as a warning. Something ancient and instinctive awakened within her, not her wolf, but something else, something deeper and older. "They're watching," she whispered to Thorn, feeling the hidden gazes among the trees. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "I know. Pretend not to notice." They continued advancing slowly. The bridge was only about 50 meters away when the first arrow cut through the air. Everything happened with surreal speed. Thorn threw them both from the horse with a fluid movement, protecting Aurora's body with his own when they hit the ground, the guards unsheathed swords, forming a defensive circle around them. Marcus was already standing, a dagger in each hand, his eyes sweeping the trees. "Protect the Omega!" ordered Thorn, his voice transformed into a guttural roar that reverberated through Aurora's body. Dark figures emerged from the shadows, men and women dressed in black leather, faces painted with ancient forbidden symbols in blood red. Their eyes shone with an unnatural light, the result of dark rituals and pacts with forces that should remain dormant. Blood hunters. 12, as Marcus had said, each armed to the teeth, each moving with the lethal grace of predators. Thorn rose quickly, pushing Aurora behind him as he unsheathed his sword, a long blade of dark metal that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. "The cursed king," said a feminine voice, melodious and cruel. A tall woman stepped forward, her blood-red hair contrasting with her alabaster-pale skin. "And the lost Pacificadora. What a fortuitous meeting." "Celine," Thorn practically spat the name. "I thought you had been banished beyond the Black Mountains." She smiled, revealing abnormally sharp canines. "Exile becomes tedious after a few decades, and when we heard the news," her eyes, of a supernatural green, fixed on Aurora. "Well, we couldn't miss the celebration, could we?" "There will be no celebration," replied Thorn, his posture subtly changing, preparing for attack. Celine laughed, the sound like shards of glass. "Oh, but there will be, just not the kind you expect." She took another step forward, her movements sinuous like those of a serpent. "Give us the girl and the pendant, Thorn, and we'll allow you and your men to live. Resist, and all will die right here." Aurora felt the tension emanating from Thorn in almost palpable waves. His wolf was close to the surface. Now she could sense its wild presence, its contained power. "You've always been foolish, Celine," he said with lethal calm, "always underestimating your opponent." It was the signal for chaos. The hunters attacked from all sides, simultaneously, moving with superhuman speed. The royal guards met the attack with equal ferocity, steel tinkling against steel, growls and screams filling the air. Thorn pushed Aurora behind a large rock. "Stay here," he ordered, before turning to face 3 hunters advancing in their direction. What followed was a demonstration of power unlike anything Aurora had ever witnessed. Thorn moved like shadow and storm combined, his sword describing lethal arcs in the twilight air. His movements were both brutal and elegant, the culmination of decades of battles and survival. 2 hunters fell quickly under his blade. The third, a massive man with ritual scars covering every inch of visible skin, managed to cut Thorn's arm, provoking a furious growl from the Alpha King. On the other side of the clearing, Marcus faced Celine in a duel of daggers and shadow magic. She conjured shadows that moved like living creatures, while he dispersed them with blades enchanted with ancient runes. The royal guards fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. Aurora saw one fall, then another. Blood stained the earth, its metallic scent filling the air, along with the more ancient and disturbing odor of the forbidden magic the hunters invoked. That was when Aurora saw one of the hunters sneaking through the shadows in her direction. He had circumvented the main battle, moving with inhuman stealth. His eyes, when they found hers, gleamed with cruel triumph. The pendant on her chest exploded with heat, and something inside her, that ancient dormant force, fully awakened. True strength doesn't roar, it whispers. Alara's words echoed in her mind, and Aurora knew what she needed to do. Now was not the time to hide. It was time to face her destiny. She stepped out from behind the rock, rising to her full height. The hunter hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by her boldness. "You're coming with me, Pacificadora," he hissed, advancing again. "No," Aurora responded, her voice surprisingly firm. "I'm not going anywhere." She brought her hand to the pendant, holding it firmly. The heat intensified, radiating through her body, and she felt ancient words rise in her throat, words she had never learned, but that seemed inscribed in her very soul. Aurora began to sing. It wasn't an ordinary song, but an ancient chant in the language of the first wolves. The syllables flowed from her lips like water, each note vibrating with serene power. The hunter stopped abruptly, his face contorting in a mixture of confusion and pain. Around the clearing, other hunters also hesitated, their heads turning in her direction. Celine shouted something in a dark language, trying to break the effect, but Aurora's voice only grew stronger. The pendant now shone, visible even through the fabric of her dress, a blue-silver light that seemed to wash away the darkness. "Aurora!" Thorn's voice sounded distant, alarmed, but she couldn't stop. The chant completely possessed her now, each note resonating with the pendant's pulse, each syllable bringing forth more of that ancient power running in her veins. Light began to emanate from the ground around her, as if the earth itself was responding to her call. Silver lines appeared, interconnecting in complex patterns that Aurora instinctively recognized as the ancient power roots, the paths the first wolves had tread, the same ones that had been corrupted by the blood hunters' rituals. Celine screamed again, this time in evident panic. "Stop her! Stop her now!" 3 hunters advanced in Aurora's direction, but Thorn appeared between them like a force of nature. His eyes were no longer gray, but black as the deepest night. His wolf had partially taken control. With a roar that shook the very trees, he faced all 3 simultaneously, moving with a speed and strength that defied comprehension. One fell immediately, his throat opened by claws that had replaced Thorn's human fingers. The other 2 retreated, evident terror on their painted faces. Aurora's chant reached its climax, and the pendant exploded in light. For a moment, everyone in the clearing was motionless, as if frozen in time. Then the hunters began to scream. It was as if the pendant's light burned them from the inside, exposing the corruption they had voluntarily embraced. They fell to their knees, abandoning their weapons, their hands covering their faces, contorted in agony. Only Celine remained standing, though her body visibly trembled. Her eyes, fixed on Aurora's, were full of hatred and, surprisingly, fear. "This doesn't end here," she hissed. "You don't know what you've awakened. You don't know what's coming." With a sinuous movement, she threw something on the ground, a small object that exploded into thick black smoke. When the smoke dissipated, she had disappeared. The other hunters, still in agony, were quickly subdued by the surviving guards and Marcus. Thorn, however, came directly toward Aurora, his eyes gradually returning to normal gray, though a storm still raged in them. "What was that?" he demanded, grasping her arms. "What did you do?" His touch brought her back to reality. The chant ceased. The pendant's light diminished until it disappeared, and Aurora felt her legs weaken. If not for Thorn's strong arms holding her, she would have fallen right there. "I don't know," she responded honestly, her voice hoarse as if she had screamed for hours. "It just happened." His gaze traveled over her face, looking for signs of lies or damage. Slowly, the fury in his eyes gave way to something more complex: admiration, confusion, and a touch of reverence. "You pacified them," he said quietly. "As in the ancient legends, you neutralized their hatred, their bloodthirst." "Not all of them," Aurora reminded him, thinking of Celine and her escape. "No," agreed Thorn, his gaze turning to the forest where she had disappeared. "She is ancient and powerful, corrupted beyond redemption." He looked back at Aurora. "But what you did, no one has witnessed such power in generations." Marcus approached, appearing shaken. "Your Majesty, we need to move on." The smoke might attract others. Thorn nodded, but didn't release Aurora. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she replied, though her body was trembling with the effort of what she had done. He clearly didn't believe her, for in a fluid movement he lifted her into his arms. "Rest," he ordered, but his voice was gentle now. "You used more energy than your body was prepared to channel." As he carried her back to the horse, Aurora felt a strange peace descend upon her, despite the danger they had just faced, as if a part of her that had always been dormant had finally awakened and found its purpose. The towers of the northern clan fortress appeared on the horizon at dawn the following day, imposing and ancient, built with dark stone that seemed to absorb the light of the rising sun. The fortress was both a stronghold and a symbol of Thorn's unifying power. During the night, after the attack, he hadn't left her alone for a single moment. They slept near the fire, his body serving as a shield between her and the rest of the world. There had been no physical intimacy beyond that, but something deeper had formed between them, a nascent bond, fragile and powerful at the same time. Now, as they approached the enormous gates, Aurora felt his body tense again. The king was returning to his kingdom, and with him the responsibilities and dangers of his position. "What happens now?" she asked softly, only for his ears. "Now," he responded, his hot breath against her ear, "we discover the truth about your past, about the pendant, and about my curse." He paused, his arms tightening almost imperceptibly around her. "And perhaps, if we're fortunate, we'll find a future that isn't just survival, but life." The gates opened before them, revealing a wide courtyard where dozens of people waited, servants, guards, nobles from the 5 clans. All gazes turned to them, and more specifically, to Aurora, the strange, fair-haired woman seated in front of the cursed king. As they crossed the courtyard, she felt the weight of their curiosity, their distrust, their hope. To them, she was a mystery, an anomaly, the Omega who had captured the attention of the untouchable king. Little did they know she carried the power to change everything, to bring balance where there was chaos, to heal ancient wounds, to break curses with a simple kiss. The pendant gently warmed against her skin, like a reminder, and the man whose arms enveloped her, the Alpha King, feared and respected by all, leaned in to whisper one last thing before they entered the great hall. "Welcome to your destiny, Aurora." The northern fortress rose like a mountain of carved stone against the dawn sky, its ancient towers reaching toward the clouds. As they passed through the massive gates, Aurora felt countless eyes upon her, curious, suspicious, hopeful. Servants bowed deeply as the Alpha King rode by, while nobles and warriors studied the pale-haired stranger at his side with barely concealed interest. The courtyard opened into a vast expanse of cobblestones, surrounded by barracks, stables, and the central keep, an imposing structure of dark granite that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the morning light. Guards in polished armor stood at attention, their faces impassive, but their eyes alert, following their king's every movement. Thorn dismounted with fluid grace, then reached up to help Aurora. As his hands encircled her waist, she felt the courtyard spin slightly, the aftermath of using powers she'd never known she possessed. Her legs trembled as they touched the ground, and she might have fallen if not for Thorn's steady grip. "The journey was difficult," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Not an explanation, but a command for others not to question her weakness. "Prepare the east chamber for our guest, and send for the royal healer." A woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun stepped forward. "Your Majesty!" She bowed, her eyes darting to Aurora with undisguised curiosity. "Everything is ready as you instructed. The archives have been opened." "Thank you, Lady Helena," Thorn replied. "This is Aurora. She will be treated with the respect due to my personal guest." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly at this unusual introduction, but she bowed again. "Of course, Your Majesty. And may I say, welcome to the Northern Fortress, my lady." Aurora managed a small nod, still dizzy from both the journey and the weight of so many stairs. She felt Thorn's hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the keep's entrance. "The council will wish to meet immediately," Marcus said quietly, appearing at Thorn's side. "News of the Blood Hunter attack will have reached them." "The council can wait," Thorn replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Aurora needs rest, and I need answers. Tell them we will convene at sunset." Inside, the fortress was a maze of stone corridors lit by iron sconces, their flames casting dancing shadows on tapestries depicting ancient battles and hunts. They climbed a winding staircase, passing guards who stood like statues, only their eyes moving to follow their king and the strange woman at his side. The east chamber, when they reached it, was unexpectedly beautiful. Unlike the stark military precision of the rest of the fortress, this room held warmth. A large fireplace already blazed, casting golden light over rich carpets and dark wooden furniture. Windows of colored glass filtered the morning sun into patterns across the stone floor, and fresh herbs hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with calming scents. "This was my mother's chamber," Thorn said quietly as the door closed behind them, leaving them alone. "She died giving birth to me, but I've kept it as she left it." Aurora took a hesitant step into the room, feeling as if she'd stepped into a sacred space. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching a tapestry depicting a silver-haired woman holding a blue pendant, unmistakably a pacificadora. "Your mother was one of them?" "No," Thorn moved to stand beside her. "My grandmother was. The gift often skips generations. My mother had the sight, but not the full powers." He turned to face her, his stormy eyes searching her face. "What happened at Black River Crossing? I've never seen anything like it. The ancient texts speak of pacificadoras calming individual alphas, but never neutralizing a dozen blood hunters simultaneously." Aurora's hand went to her pendant, which felt cool now, dormant. "I don't know what happened. It was like something moved through me, used me as a vessel. Words I never learned came to my lips." "The old tongue," Thorn nodded. "The language of the first wolves. It's said the most powerful spells can only be spoken in that language." He moved to a wooden chest near the bed and opened it, removing several ancient scrolls and a leather-bound book. "These belong to my grandmother. They might help us understand what's happening and what the blood hunters want." Aurora sank onto a cushioned chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. Just days ago, she had been the village outcast, the Omega without lineage. Now she sat in a royal chamber, discussing ancient powers and blood magic with the Alpha King himself. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I can't control it? What if I'm not strong enough for what's coming?" Thorn knelt before her, a gesture so unexpected from an Alpha King that Aurora's breath caught. His face, usually masked in regal impassivity, showed genuine concern. "What you did at the crossing wasn't just strong, Aurora. It was magnificent." His voice deepened on the last word, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "But you don't have to face this alone. Whatever comes, we face it together." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A small woman entered, carrying a tray with steaming herbs and cloths. "Your Majesty," she bowed, then turned to Aurora. "I am Lydia, the royal healer. I've brought something for your exhaustion after the journey." As Lydia approached, something in her scent made Aurora tense. It wasn't hostile, but there was a strange undercurrent of recognition. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she set down the tray and began mixing herbs. "You've traveled far, my lady," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "From the Crescent Moon clan, I understand." "Yes," Aurora answered, watching the woman's movements carefully. "Though I wasn't born there, I was found as an infant." Lydia's hands stilled for just a moment. "Found? How interesting. Many children were displaced during the conflicts following the Great War." Thorn had noticed the tension as well. He moved closer to Aurora, his presence protective. "Lydia has served the fortress for 30 years, he said. "She was my father's healer before mine." "And I served your grandmother before him," Lydia added, her eyes finally meeting Aurora's. "I recognize that pendant, child. I never thought I'd see it again." Aurora clutched the blue stone. You know what it is? The moonstone, Lydia whispered, glancing nervously at the door as if afraid of being overheard. The symbol of the Pacificadora bloodline. Queen Cassandra wore it until the night she disappeared. Thorne's eyes narrowed. What do you know of that night, Lydia? The official records say she died in battle. The old healer's face showed conflict, years of silence warring with a desperate need to speak. Official records can be altered, Your Majesty, especially when those who write them have something to hide. She approached Aurora, her weathered hand hovering near the pendant, but not touching it. The stone recognizes its own. It would not shine for anyone but a true descendant of the line. Tell me everything, Thorne commanded, his voice soft, but leaving no room for refusal. Lydia sighed deeply, looking suddenly much older. It was the final night of the Great War. The 5 clans were gathered here, in this very fortress, to sign the peace treaty. Queen Cassandra had used her Pacificadora powers to bring the warring alphas to the table, a miracle many thought impossible. She moved to close the chamber windows before continuing. Your father, King Aldrich, was newly crowned after his own father's death in battle. He was young, powerful, and ambitious. Some say too ambitious. What happened? Aurora asked, feeling the pendant warm slightly against her skin. The signing was to take place at midnight under the full moon. But an hour before, chaos erupted. Blood hunters infiltrated the fortress. Dozens died in the fighting. When it was over, Queen Cassandra had vanished, and with her, the moonstone pendant. Thorne's face had hardened into a mask of controlled rage. You're saying my father was involved in her disappearance? It wasn't a question, but Lydia nodded nonetheless. Not directly, Your Majesty. He was manipulated by forces he didn't fully understand. The blood hunters had infiltrated his council, poisoned his mind with promises of power beyond imagining. They convinced him that with the Pacificadora gone, he could unite all 5 clans under his rule. And he believed them. Thorne's voice was cold as winter. He was young and grieving his father. Lydia's eyes held compassion, despite the terrible tale she told. But on the night it was to happen, something went wrong. The blood hunters didn't just want Queen Cassandra removed. They wanted her blood for their darkest ritual. Your father discovered this too late and tried to stop them. Aurora felt a chill run through her body. Did they kill her? No one knows for certain, Lydia whispered. The Queen's personal guard found the blood hunters preparing for the ritual. In the fighting that followed, she disappeared. Some say she escaped into the wilderness, mortally wounded. Others believe she used the last of her power to transport herself far away. The healer's eyes fixed on Aurora's face, studying every feature. But she was with child when she vanished. A daughter, not yet born. The room fell silent. Aurora felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. The pendant burned against her skin now, almost painfully hot. You think I'm... She couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too overwhelming. I delivered Queen Cassandra's first 2 children, Lydia said softly. You have her eyes, her hair, and you wear her pendant, the stone that can only be passed through blood. Thorne moved to this window, his broad shoulders tense. If this is true, then Aurora is the rightful heir to the northern throne. My father was a usurper. Lydia shook her head quickly. No, Your Majesty. King Aldrich was Queen Cassandra's chosen consort. After her disappearance, he was the only one who could hold the fragile peace together. And when he realized how the blood hunters had used him, he spent the rest of his life hunting them down. Until they murdered him, Thorne said grimly, and cursed his son. He turned back to them, his face showing the weight of this revelation. If Aurora is Queen Cassandra's daughter, the blood hunters will never stop coming for her. The prophecy said the daughter of the last Pacificadora would be more powerful than all who came before, powerful enough to close forever the dark pathways the blood hunters used to draw their power. Aurora rose from her chair, legs still unsteady. What prophecy? Instead of answering, Thorne went to the ancient book he'd taken from the chest. He opened it to a page marked with a silk ribbon and read aloud, When darkness falls across the 5 clans once more, she will return. the daughter of the Silver Queen, bearer of the Moonstone, with power to bind the broken lands. Through her blood and sacrifice, the pathways will be sealed. Through her kiss freely given, the cursed Alpha will be redeemed." The words hung in the air, ancient and heavy with destiny. Aurora felt them settle into her bones, as if they had always been there, waiting to be awakened. "That's why they attacked us," she whispered. "They need my blood before I can fully awaken my powers." "And they need me as well," Thorn added grimly. "The curse they placed on me wasn't just to prevent me finding a mate. It was to ensure no Pacificadora could ever bond with me. They fear our combined power." Lydia gathered her medicines with trembling hands. "There is more you should know, but not here. The fortress has ears. Tonight, when the moon rises, come to the old temple in the northern garden. Bring the ceremonial dress and the pendant. I will tell you what I know of the ritual that can break the curse." After she left, Aurora and Thorn stood in silence, the weight of revelations pressing down upon them. Finally, Aurora spoke, her voice small but determined. "If I am who you both think I am, if I'm the daughter of Queen Cassandra, then my entire life has been a lie." Thorn approached her slowly, as if afraid she might shatter. "Not a lie. A protection. Alara kept you hidden until you were ready to face your destiny." "But I'm not ready," Aurora whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I don't know how to be a queen or a Pacificadora. I don't know how to save anyone." "What you did at Black River Crossing suggests otherwise," Thorn said gently. "The power is in you, Aurora. It always has been." He reached out hesitantly, his fingers barely touching her cheek. "Rest now. I must meet with the council, but guards will be posted outside your door. No one will harm you here." After he left, Aurora moved to the large bed, its soft furs a luxury she'd never known in her simple life with Alara. She lay down, clutching the pendant, and closed her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Too many thoughts raced through her mind, of mothers she'd never known, of queens and curses, of prophecies that had been written about her before she was born. She must have dozed eventually, for she awoke to the sound of the chamber door opening. Twilight had fallen, painting the room in shades of deep blue. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. "Who's there?" Aurora called, sitting up quickly. "Forgive me, my lady. I didn't mean to startle you." A young woman entered, carrying a tray of food. "The king asked me to bring you something to eat before the council meeting." As she set the tray down, Aurora studied her. No more than 16, with dark hair and eyes that held a haunted quality. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being invisible. "What's your name?" Aurora asked. The girl looked surprised at being addressed. "Nora, my lady." "Thank you for the food, Nora. Have you served in the fortress long?" "Since I was a child," she replied, arranging cups and plates with practiced ease. "My mother was a kitchen maid here before me." Something in the girl's manner reminded Aurora painfully of herself, the careful movements, the downcast eyes, the habit of taking up as little space as possible, a lifetime of trying to be invisible. "Do you know why the king brought me here?" Aurora asked, curious what rumors had spread. Nora hesitated, then spoke quietly. "They say you're a Pacificadora, like in the old stories. They say you made the blood hunters fall to their knees with just your voice." "And what do you think of that?" The girl's eyes finally met Aurora's. I think if it's true, then maybe things will change. For all of us." Before Aurora could question her further, a knock sounded at the door. Nora quickly bowed and moved to open it, revealing Thorn in formal attire. A midnight blue tunic embroidered with silver, a heavy cloak fastened with a wolf's head clasp, and the simple crown upon his dark hair. "The council awaits," he said, his eyes taking in Aurora's disheveled appearance from sleep. "I've brought something for you to wear." He gestured, and 2 servants entered carrying a gown of deep blue velvet, silver embroidery catching the lamplight like stars. Aurora's breath caught at the sight. "It was my grandmother's," Thorn explained. "A Pacificadora should look the part when meeting the council." As the servants helped her dress behind a painted screen, Aurora felt the weight of the garment settle upon her shoulders like the responsibility it represented. The blue of the gown matched her pendant exactly, and when she emerged, Thorn's expression told her all she needed to know. "You look like her," he said softly, "like Queen Cassandra in the portraits." The council chamber lay deep within the fortress, a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. 12 chairs surrounded a round table of polished stone, and in its center burned a fire in a bronze basin. As Aurora entered on Thorn's arm, 12 pairs of eyes turned to her, some curious, some hostile, all assessing. The counselors rose as one, bowing to their king, but keeping their gazes fixed on the stranger with silver-gold hair. "Esteemed council," Thorn's voice filled the chamber with authority, "I present to you Aurora of the Crescent Moon clan. She comes under my personal protection and will be treated with all the respect that entails." An elderly man with a silver beard stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we have heard disturbing reports of an attack by blood hunters. Is it true they specifically targeted this guest of yours?" "They did, Lord Ambrose," Thorn replied evenly. "And they failed. Aurora demonstrated power not seen in these lands for a generation." Murmurs rippled through the council. A woman with sharp features and calculating eyes spoke next. "Are we to understand, Your Majesty, that this woman is a pacificadora? The legends speak of only one such being born each generation." "Not merely a pacificadora, Lady Merida," Thorn said, his voice deliberately casual, though Aurora sensed the tension beneath. "Aurora bears the moonstone pendant, the ancestral symbol of the bloodline, and Lydia, who served my grandmother, has confirmed her identity." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Ambrose paled visibly. "You cannot mean—" "I mean exactly what you fear," Thorn cut him off. "Aurora is the daughter of Queen Cassandra, born after her mother's disappearance 20 years ago." Chaos broke out among the council. Some rose from their seats, shouting questions or denials. Others sat in stunned silence. Through it all, Aurora stood still, feeling their emotions wash over her like waves. Disbelief, fear, hope, calculation. "Enough!" Thorn's voice cut through the tumult like a blade. The room fell silent instantly. "I did not bring her here for your approval or judgment. I brought her because the blood hunters have returned in force, and the prophecy foretold this moment." He placed a hand on the hilt of his sword, a gesture that reminded everyone present of his ultimate authority. "Aurora will be given access to the royal archives and all texts pertaining to the Pacificadora lineage. She will be treated as my honored guest and accorded all privileges of her bloodline." Lady Merida's cold eyes narrowed. "And what of the other part of the prophecy, Your Majesty? The part concerning the cursed Alpha and the kiss freely given?" A dangerous stillness fell over Thorn. "That is not the council's concern." "With respect," she persisted, "if there is a chance to break the curse that has limited Your Majesty's ability to produce an heir, it is very much our concern." Aurora felt heat rise to her cheeks at the blunt reference to the intimate nature of the prophecy. But before Thorn could respond, a new voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. "The prophecy will unfold as it is meant to, in its own time." All heads turned as Lydia stepped forward, her simple healer's robes a stark contrast to the finery of the council. "I served Queen Cassandra before her disappearance. I was there the night she fled, heavy with child, and I recognize her daughter now before us." She approached Aurora, and to everyone's shock, knelt before her. "The moonstone has awakened. The daughter has returned. Let those with wisdom prepare, for the time of reckoning approaches." One by one, the council members rose from their seats and knelt, some reluctantly, some with tears in their eyes. Aurora stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gesture of fealty to a queen she never knew she was. Only Thorn remained standing at her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "The council is dismissed," he said quietly. "We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss defensive measures against the blood hunters." As the councilors filed out, many casting backward glances at Aurora, Lydia approached them. "The moon rises," she whispered. "Meet me at the temple as planned." Later, as they walked through the moonlit gardens toward an ancient stone structure nearly hidden by climbing roses, Aurora finally found her voice again. "They knelt to me," she said, still disbelieving. "They don't even know me." "They knelt to what you represent," Thorn replied. "Hope, the return of balance, the possibility of peace without bloodshed." The temple was small and circular, open to the sky above. At its center stood an altar of white stone, and upon it Lydia had placed a silver bowl filled with clear water, bundles of herbs, and an ancient scroll. "The ritual must be performed under the full moon," she explained as they entered. "3 nights from now, it will require courage from you both." She unrolled the scroll carefully, revealing illustrations of a ritual circle with 2 figures at its center. The curse placed on King Thorn was designed to twist his alpha nature against him, to turn his strength into isolation, his power into coldness. It can only be broken by its opposite, the freely offered connection of a pacificadora. "The kiss mentioned in the prophecy," Aurora said quietly. Lydia nodded. "Not just any kiss, a true bonding, soul to soul, with the moonstone as conduit. But there is danger in the ritual. The blood hunters will sense it beginning. They will do anything to stop it. For when the curse breaks, so too will their hold on the dark pathways they use for power." Thorn's face was solemn in the moonlight. "What must we do to prepare?" "For 3 days you must both purify yourselves. No meat, no wine, only clear water and simple foods. Meditate on your connection each morning and evening." Lydia handed Aurora a small vial of clear liquid. "Mix 3 drops of this with water and drink it before sleeping. It will help awaken your ancestral memories, prepare your mind for the full expression of your powers." She turned to Thorn. "For you, Your Majesty, this will be especially difficult. The curse will fight against its breaking. You will experience increased aggression, powerful urges to isolate yourself. You must resist." Aurora looked at Thorn, suddenly afraid. She had seen his strength, his control, but she had also glimpsed the wildness beneath, the barely contained power of his alpha nature. "What if it's too strong?" she asked. "What if the curse makes him dangerous?" "That is why you are here," Lydia said simply. "Your presence calms his wolf, even now. Over the next 3 days, that bond will strengthen naturally, preparing you both for the ritual." She gathered her herbs, preparing to leave. "One last warning. Trust no one completely, not even those who seem most loyal. The blood hunters have had decades to infiltrate the fortress. They will have spies, perhaps even among the council." After she departed, Aurora and Thorn stood alone in the moonlight, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down upon them. "Are you afraid?" Aurora asked, studying his face. "Yes," he answered without hesitation, surprising her with his honesty. "Not of the ritual itself, but of failing, of not being strong enough to protect you when the blood hunters come, and they will come." "And I'm afraid of not being who everyone needs me to be," Aurora admitted. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't control the power when it fully awakens?" Thorn took her hands in his, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. His eyes, usually stormy gray, seemed almost silver in the moonlight. "Then we will be afraid together," he said softly. "And perhaps that's as it should be. Fear keeps us alert, keeps us honest." He looked up at the moon, full and bright above them. 3 days. In 3 days, we either break a curse generations old, or we fail, and the blood hunters grow stronger than ever. Aurora felt the pendant warm against her skin, responding to something in his voice, or perhaps to their joined hands. "In 3 days," she agreed, "we find out if the prophecy spoke true." As they walked back toward the fortress, neither noticed the small shadow that detached itself from behind a column and slipped away into the darkness, nor the raven that took flight from a nearby tree, winging its way toward the mountains where, in a cave of black stone, Selene waited for news of the Pacificadora and her cursed king. Dawn painted the northern fortress in shades of amber and gold as Aurora stood at her chamber window, watching the world awaken. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a ritual that might change everything or doom them all if it failed. The enormity of what lay ahead settled over her like a physical weight. A gentle knock pulled her from her thoughts. Nora entered, carrying a tray with a simple breakfast of bread, honey, and herbal tea. "Good morning, my lady," she said with a small bow. "I've brought your breakfast according to healer Lydia's instructions." Aurora smiled at the young servant. "Thank you, Nora. And please, when we're alone, just call me Aurora." Surprise flickered across the girl's face, followed by a cautious smile. "As you wish, Aurora. The king asked me to tell you he'll meet you in the Eastern Garden after you've broken your fast. The first purification ritual will begin at sunrise." As Nora arranged the food, Aurora noticed dark shadows beneath the girl's eyes. "Are you unwell?" she asked. "You look tired." Nora flinched slightly. "I'm fine, my lady. Aurora. Just strange dreams lately. Many in the fortress have them. They say it happens when great change is coming." "What kind of dreams?" The girl hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. "Blood and fire. A woman with silver hair standing on a mountain of bones. A wolf with eyes like midnight swallowing the moon." She shivered. "Old magic stirring. That's what grandmother says." "Your grandmother is wise," Aurora said softly. "Old magic is indeed stirring. But not all magic brings destruction. Some brings healing." After eating the simple but nourishing breakfast, Aurora changed into the white ceremonial dress Elara had given her. The fabric seemed to shimmer in the morning light, the small blue stones catching the sun like drops of captured sky. With the moonstone pendant around her neck, she felt both vulnerable and powerful, a contradiction that seemed to define her new life. The Eastern Garden was the smallest of the fortress's 4 main gardens, but also the most secluded. Ancient stone walls covered in climbing roses enclosed a circular space with an ornate fountain at its center. The water flowed from the mouth of a carved wolf, falling into a basin where blue lotus flowers floated on the surface. Thorn already waited there, dressed simply in a white linen shirt and dark trousers. Without his armor or royal regalia, he looked younger, less burdened. Yet as she approached, Aurora noticed the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his movements. "You came," he said, a note of relief in his voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" His eyes met hers. "The burden placed on you is immense. No one would blame you for walking away from it." "And go where?" Aurora asked with a sad smile. "Back to being invisible in a village that never accepted me? Now that I know who I am, who my mother was, there's no going back." Lydia emerged from a small stone building at the garden's edge, carrying a silver bowl and bundles of herbs. She had exchanged her simple healer's robes for ceremonial garments of deep blue, her steel-gray hair unbound and flowing down her back. "The sun rises," she said, her voice taking on a formal cadence. "Let the purification begin." She instructed them to stand on opposite sides of the fountain, the rising sun between them. Into the water, she sprinkled crushed herbs and drops of clear oil that released a sharp, clean scent. Pine and mint, with an undercurrent of something wilder, more ancient. "Dip your hands in the water," she instructed. "Feel its coolness. Let it wash away doubt, fear, anger. Let it purify your intentions." As Aurora's fingers touched the water, she felt a strange, tingling sensation travel up her arms. The moonstone pendant grew warm against her skin, and the blue stones on her dress seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Across the fountain, Thorn's face tightened, his eyes momentarily flashing with midnight darkness. His wolf, stirring beneath the surface. Lydia began to chant in the old tongue, the same ancient language Aurora had unconsciously used against the blood hunters. Though she couldn't understand the individual words, their meaning resonated within her. Cleansing, preparation, awakening, connection. The water beneath their hands began to glow with a subtle blue light, the same color as the moonstone. Aurora felt something unfurling inside her, like a flower opening to the sun. Power, ancient and primal, flowing through her veins. Across from her, Thorn's breathing grew heavier, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the fountain's edge. "Control it," Lydia whispered to him. "The curse fights against the purification. Your wolf senses freedom and rages against its chains." Thorn's jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck standing out with effort. The water around his hands began to darken, tendrils of shadow spreading through the luminous blue. Without thinking, Aurora reached across the fountain and placed her hands over his. The moment their skin touched, energy surged between them, her light pushing back his darkness, his strength anchoring her power. The water cleared, returning to its radiant blue. "Remarkable," Lydia breathed. "The connection between you is already stronger than I anticipated." When the ritual ended, Aurora felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, as if she had run a great distance but emerged stronger for it. Thorn looked similarly affected, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. "That was just the beginning," Lydia told them, collecting her herbs. "Each ritual will grow more intense as we approach the full moon. The curse will fight harder, and your powers will grow stronger in response." She handed each of them a small vial of blue liquid. "Drink this at midday. It will help maintain the connection established this morning. And remember, avoid meat, wine, and—" She hesitated, glancing between them. "Physical intimacy. Your energies must remain focused for the ritual." After she left, an awkward silence fell between them. Aurora was acutely aware of the lingering warmth where their hands had touched, the strange pull she felt toward him. "I should attend to council matters," Thorn said finally. "Marcus has reports of blood hunter movements along the northern border." "And I should study the texts you gave me," Aurora replied. "There's so much I need to learn about my heritage, about the pacificadores who came before me." They parted with formal nods, both pretending not to notice how their bodies seemed to lean toward each other, how difficult it was to walk away. The royal archives occupied the entire west wing of the fortress's lowest level, a vast labyrinth of shelves and cabinets containing centuries of knowledge. Aurora spent the morning there, surrounded by ancient scrolls and leather-bound tomes, absorbing everything she could about her lineage. The histories painted a complex picture. The pacificadores had indeed been revered for their ability to bring peace and balance, but they had also been feared, even hunted at times by alphas who saw their power as a threat to dominance. They served as advisors, healers, and mediators, standing between warring factions when blood threatened to spill. Most intriguing were the personal journals of past pacificadores, including Aurora's grandmother and great-grandmother. Their private thoughts revealed the burden of their gift, the constant pull of others' emotions, the responsibility of power that could alter the course of nations. From Queen Cassandra's journal, Aurora learned of her mother's deepest fears. "The darkness grows stronger. I feel it pressing against the borders of our lands, seeking entrance. The blood hunters multiply, feeding on discord and pain. My dreams are filled with fire and shadow. If what the prophecy says is true, my unborn daughter will face challenges far greater than mine. How do I protect a child from a destiny written before her birth?" Aurora traced her fingers over her mother's elegant handwriting, feeling a connection across time. The woman who had hidden her away, who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe from those who would use her power. "You found her journals." She looked up to find Thorn standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light. "Yes," Aurora said. Aurora. She knew what was coming. She tried to prepare, to protect me. He moved to join her, his gaze falling on the open journal. "My father spoke of her rarely, but when he did, it was with great respect. He said she could calm a room full of angry alphas with just her presence, that her voice alone could soothe the most savage wolf." "Did he love her?" Aurora asked suddenly. Thorn considered this. "I believe he did, in his way. Their union was arranged for political purposes, but the records suggest they developed genuine affection. After her disappearance, he was never the same. The weight of guilt changed him." And now we're meant to undo what was set in motion that night, Aurora said quietly. To close the pathways the blood hunters opened. If we succeed, Thorn nodded. But there's something you should see first. He led her deeper into the archives, to a section protected by heavy iron doors and magical wards. Inside, a single pedestal held an ancient stone tablet, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change as Aurora looked at them. The original prophecy, Thorn explained. Not the simplified version passed down through generations, but the complete text as recorded by the first seer 1,000 years ago. Aurora approached the tablet cautiously. As her fingers hovered near its surface, the moonstone pendant flared with light, and suddenly the shifting symbols resolved into words she could understand. When darkness falls across the 5 clans once more, she will return, the daughter of the Silver Queen, bearer of the moonstone, with power to bind the broken lands. Through her blood and sacrifice, the pathways will be sealed. Through her kiss freely given, the cursed Alpha will be redeemed. But heed this warning. What was sundered in betrayal can only be restored in truth. The price of power is life itself. The Alpha and the Omega must become one, or all will fall to endless night. Aurora's hand fell away from the tablet, her heart pounding. The price of power is life itself? Does that mean— It could be interpreted many ways, Thorn said quickly. Ancient prophecies are deliberately ambiguous. But his eyes betrayed his concern. The ritual might demand more than either of them had anticipated. Why show me this now? Aurora asked. Because you deserve the truth, all of it, before we proceed further, he answered. This path we're on, I would not have you walk it blindly. She studied his face, seeing not the fearsome Alpha King others knew, but a man carrying burdens few could understand. Thank you for your honesty. It doesn't change my decision. Their midday meal was taken together in a small courtyard, the simple fare of fresh bread, fruit, and clear spring water in keeping with their purification regimen. As they ate, Aurora found herself watching Thorn's hands, remembering their strength when they had touched hers that morning. Tell me about your life, he said unexpectedly. Before all this, what was it like growing up in the Crescent Moon village? Aurora smiled wryly. Lonely. I was always different. My appearance, my inability to shift fully. Alara was my only true friend. The others tolerated me at best, scorned me at worst. You never transformed into your wolf? Thorn asked, surprised. Not completely. I would feel the shift begin, my senses sharpening, my nails lengthening, but then it would stop, as if something blocked the transformation. She touched the pendant. Now I wonder if this was somehow preventing it, keeping my power dormant until the right time. And yet, despite how they treated you, you learned compassion rather than bitterness, Thorn observed. You became a healer. Alara taught me that true strength lies in healing, not harming, Aurora said. She was right, though I didn't fully understand until now. Their conversation continued through the afternoon as they shared stories of their vastly different lives, she as the village outcast, he as the cursed king. Beneath the formal words lay a current of growing connection, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their differences. That evening brought the second purification ritual. This time they met in the western garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across the stone pathways. Lydia awaited them beside a small fire burning in a copper brazier. The morning ritual cleansed your physical bodies, she explained. Tonight, we prepare your spirits. She instructed them to sit cross-legged on either side of the fire, close enough that their knees almost touched. Into the flames, she cast herbs that filled the air with sweet-smelling smoke. Breathe deeply, she said. Let the smoke fill your lungs. It will open your mind to the spirit realm, allow you to see beyond the physical. As Aurora inhaled the fragrant smoke, the world around her began to shift and change. Colors intensified, sounds sharpened, and the veil between worlds thinned. She could sense the fortress's ancient stones breathing, feel the pulse of life in the garden's plants and soil. Most startlingly, She could perceive Thorn's essence across the fire, a storm of midnight blue and silver, powerful and conflicted, with threads of darkness winding through his aura like chains. The curse. She could actually see it, constricting his spirit, fighting against the purification. Without conscious thought, Aurora reached across the fire. This time, instead of touching his physical hands, she extended her awareness toward his spirit. Her essence manifested as golden light with threads of blue flowing like water toward his storm. When they connected on this ethereal plane, the sensation was overwhelming. His thoughts and emotions rushed into her: loneliness, responsibility, rage against the curse that had isolated him, and beneath it all, a desperate hope that she might be his salvation. In turn, she felt her consciousness flowing into him, her fears, her confusion about her identity, her growing attachment to him despite their brief acquaintance, and her determination to fulfill the destiny that had claimed her. For one breathtaking moment, they were truly one being, sharing a single consciousness. Then, gently, Lydia's voice called them back to themselves. "Enough," she said softly. "You must maintain separate identities for now. The full joining will come with the ritual." As Aurora returned fully to her body, she found tears streaming down her face. Across the fire, Thorn looked equally shaken, his usual composure fractured by the intensity of their connection. What was that?" Aurora whispered. "Soul recognition," Lydia explained. "Your spirits remember each other from beyond time. It's rare, even between pacificadores and their destined alphas." Her eyes showed both wonder and concern. "The bond forming between you is exceptionally powerful, but that makes the danger greater as well. If one falls, the other may not survive." That night, after returning to her chambers, Aurora found sleep impossible. Her mind buzzed with the lingering connection to Thorn, her body humming with energy that had nowhere to go. The purification rituals were awakening something primal within her, something that called out to its counterpart in him. Near midnight, unable to remain still, she slipped from her bed and wrapped a cloak around her nightdress. The fortress corridors were quiet, lit only by occasional torches that cast flickering shadows on the stone walls. Without consciously deciding where to go, Aurora found herself drawn to the northern tower, her feet climbing the winding staircase as if guided by an unseen force. At the top, a single door stood partially open, a sliver of moonlight spilling through the gap. Aurora hesitated, suddenly aware of where her midnight wandering had led her, to Thorn's private chambers. She should turn back, return to her room, respect the boundaries Lydia had set for them during the purification. But before she could retreat, the door swung open fully, revealing Thorn standing in the moonlight. Like her, he appeared unable to sleep, dressed only in loose trousers, his chest bare. "I felt you approaching," he said quietly. "The connection between us grows stronger." Aurora couldn't help but notice the scars that marked his torso, evidence of countless battles, and, most prominently, a large ritual scar over his heart, the physical manifestation of the curse she had seen in their spiritual joining. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "My mind won't quiet." "Nor mine." He stepped back, silently inviting her into his sanctuary. The king's chambers were surprisingly austere for a man of his station. Functional furniture, weapons displayed on the walls, a large bed with simple linens. The only luxury was a wide balcony overlooking the northern mountains, their peaks silver in the moonlight. "It's beautiful," Aurora said, moving to the balcony's edge. "You can see all the way to the horizon." "My father had this tower built for my mother," Thorn explained, joining her at the railing. "She loved the mountains, said they reminded her of eternity, of things that endure beyond our brief lives." They stood in silence for a moment, the cool night air carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. Aurora was acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the heat radiating from his skin, of how the moonlight silvered his dark hair. "We shouldn't be alone together," she finally said, though she made no move to leave. "Lydia warned us about distractions." "Yes," Thorn agreed, his voice rough. But I find myself wondering if this connection between us is something that should be fought or embraced." He turned to face her, his gray eyes darkened with emotion. "The curse fights hardest when you're near, yet I've never felt more alive than in these past days with you. It's as if I've been half asleep for 15 years, and only now am I truly awakening." Aurora understood exactly what he meant. All her life she had felt incomplete, disconnected, the Omega who couldn't fully transform, the girl without a past. But since meeting Thorn, since learning of her heritage, she had begun to feel whole for the first time. "Tomorrow is the final purification ritual," she said softly, "and then the full moon. And then we discover if prophecies speak true," he finished. Their eyes held in the moonlight, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. Slowly, carefully, Thorn reached out, his fingers lightly touching a strand of her silver-gold hair. "If I could choose my fate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I would choose this, curse or no curse. I would choose you." The moment balanced on a knife's edge, both of them aware of how easily they could cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. Not yet. With visible effort, Thorn stepped back, breaking the spell. "You should return to your chambers," he said. "We both need whatever rest we can find before tomorrow." Aurora nodded, knowing he was right, yet reluctant to leave. As she turned to go, he spoke once more. "Aurora, whatever happens with the ritual, know this. You have brought light back to these halls. For that alone, I am grateful." Dawn of the third day broke with ominous clouds gathering over the mountains, as if nature itself sensed the approaching confrontation between ancient powers. Aurora woke from troubled dreams of blood and fire, her heart racing, the moonstone pendant burning against her skin. Nora arrived with her breakfast, her young face tight with worry. "The guards say blood hunters have been spotted in the forest beyond the northern gate," she whispered as she poured tea, "and strange lights were seen on the mountain peaks last night." "They know what's coming," Aurora said grimly. "They'll try to stop the ritual." "The king has doubled the guards at every entrance," Nora replied. "No one will reach you, my lady. He swore it." The final purification ritual took place at noon, when the sun stood directly overhead. This time, they met in the central courtyard, the heart of the fortress, where an ancient stone circle had been inlaid in the cobblestones centuries ago. Lydia awaited them, now dressed in ceremonial robes of white and silver. Around the circle stood 12 of Thorn's most trusted guards, their faces solemn beneath their helmets. "The first ritual purified your bodies," Lydia intoned. "The second, your spirits. This final ritual will unite your purpose and prepare you for tomorrow's bond." She directed them to stand in the center of the stone circle, facing each other. Unlike the previous rituals, this one required physical contact. They were to clasp forearms, creating an unbroken circuit between them. As Aurora's hands closed around Thorn's muscular forearms and his around hers, she felt an immediate surge of energy. The moonstone flared with blue-white light, and the ceremonial stones in her dress responded in kind, creating a constellation of light around her. Lydia began to chant, circling them with slow, measured steps. She carried a silver chalice filled with a luminous liquid that seemed to contain captured moonlight. As she completed each circuit, she sprinkled drops of the liquid onto the stone circle, which began to glow with ancient runes. Aurora felt the power building within her, stronger than anything she had experienced before. It coursed through her veins like liquid fire, seeking an outlet, a purpose. Across from her, Thorn's eyes had darkened completely, his wolf rising to the surface in response to her power. "The curse fights," Lydia warned, her voice tight with concentration. "It senses its end approaching." Thorn's grip on Aurora's arms tightened painfully, his face contorting with effort. The veins in his neck and temples stood out as he struggled against the darkness within him. "Stay with me," Aurora whispered. "Focus on my voice, on my touch." She poured her consciousness into their connection, using the techniques she had discovered in her mother's journals. A Pacificadora's greatest gift was empathy. the ability to share another's burden, to absorb pain and transform it into healing energy. As she opened herself fully to Thorn's struggle, she felt the curse's true nature for the first time, not just a spell of isolation, but a parasite feeding on his life force, twisting his alpha power into something cold and sterile. It had been slowly killing him for 15 years, draining his vitality while maintaining just enough of his strength to rule. Anger flared within Aurora at this realization. Anger at those who had done this to him, at the years stolen from both of them. That anger became determination, and determination became power. "I see you," she said to the curse, her voice resonating with authority. "And tomorrow, I end you." The curse responded with a last, vicious attack. Thorn gasped, his knees buckling as if struck by a physical blow. Aurora held firm, supporting his weight, refusing to break their connection. Through their joined arms, she sent her own strength flowing into him, not just the power of a pacificadora, but the simple human resolve of a woman who had decided that this man would not face his demons alone. Slowly, the darkness receded. Thorn's breathing steadied, and his eyes cleared, returning to their normal stormy gray. The circle's glow faded, and Lydia completed her final circuit, emptying the last drops of the moonlight liquid onto the stones. "It is done," she announced, her voice weary but satisfied. "You are prepared for tomorrow's ritual. The rest of today and tonight you must remain apart. Meditate, rest, gather your strength. At midnight, when the full moon reaches its zenith, we begin." As the guards escorted them to their separate chambers, Aurora cast one last glance at Thorn. In that brief look, she saw everything they couldn't say aloud: fear, hope, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. Aurora spent them reading her mother's journals, committing to memory the details of the bonding ritual they would perform, and practicing the ancient words she would need to speak. Outside her window, she watched the fortress prepare for potential attack. Guards doubled on the walls, archers positioned on towers, supplies moved to secure locations. As sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, a soft knock came at her door. It was Lydia, carrying a simple white gown and a silver circlet set with a single blue stone. "For tonight's ritual," she explained, laying them carefully on the bed. "Queen Cassandra wore these when she bonded with King Aldrich. They've been kept safe all these years, waiting for you." Aurora touched the gown reverently. "Did you know? All this time, did you know I would return?" Lydia's weathered face softened. "I hoped. When your mother fled that night, wounded but determined to protect her unborn child, I gave her my solemn oath that I would wait for you, that when the time came, I would help you claim your birthright." She took Aurora's hands in her own. "There's something else you should know before tonight. Something about your father." Aurora's heart skipped. "My father? But I thought King Aldrich was Queen Cassandra's consort, yes, but not your father." Lydia's eyes held ancient sorrow. "Your mother loved another before she was betrothed to the king, a warrior from the eastern clans named Alaric. Their love was forbidden. He was not of royal blood, but true nonetheless. What happened to him? He died defending your mother the night of the attack. His sacrifice gave her the chance to escape." Lydia squeezed Aurora's hands gently. "I tell you this not to burden you, but so you understand the choice before you tonight. The ritual requires absolute truth between participants. No secrets, no reservations." Aurora understood the implication. "I need to tell Thorn." "Yes, before your souls can truly bond, this truth must be acknowledged." Lydia rose to leave. "Rest now. I will return at midnight to escort you to the ritual grounds." Left alone, Aurora stood at her window, watching the full moon rise above the mountains. Somewhere out there, the blood hunters would be preparing their own rituals, gathering their forces for what they must know would be their last chance to stop her. And here in the fortress, Thorn would be preparing himself for a ritual that might free him from his curse, or bind him forever to a woman who was not who he thought she was. The daughter not of his father's queen, but of a common warrior and a royal mother who had chosen love over duty. Would that change how he saw her? Would it matter to the ritual or to his heart? As darkness fell completely and the moon climbed higher, Aurora changed into the ritual gown, its fabric cool and light against her skin. The moonstone pendant glowed steadily against her chest, and when she placed the silver circlet on her brow, its blue stone resonated in harmony with the pendant. In the mirror, a stranger looked back at her, not Aurora the village outcast, but a queen's daughter coming into her power. For the first time, she truly saw her mother in her own face, understood the legacy she carried. "I'm ready," she whispered to the reflection, to her ancestors, to the destiny that had claimed her. "Whatever comes, I am ready." Midnight approached with a silence that seemed to press against the stones of the fortress like a living thing. The full moon hung enormous in the black sky, casting silver light across the mountains and forests, illuminating clouds that raced across its face like spectral messengers. Within the northern fortress, every torch burned, every guard stood alert, weapons ready. They were waiting, all of them, for what would come. When Lydia appeared at Aurora's door, she was no longer alone. 4 women of varying ages accompanied her, each dressed in ceremonial blue robes with silver embroidery. "The surviving priestesses of the moon," Lydia explained, called from the far corners of the 5 clans to bear witness and lend their power to the ritual. The eldest, a woman whose face was mapped with deep lines of wisdom, stepped forward to take Aurora's hands. "I knew your mother," she said, her voice like autumn leaves rustling. "You have her spirit in your eyes." "And her strength in your bearing," added another younger priestess. They draped a cloak of midnight blue over Aurora's white gown, fastening it with a silver brooch shaped like a crescent moon. The fabric seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, tiny stars woven into the material catching the lamplight. "The ceremonial cloak of the Pacificadora," Lydia explained, "woven with silver thread drawn under the full moon. It will help focus and amplify your power during the ritual." As they escorted her through the silent corridors, Aurora felt the moonstone pendant growing warmer against her skin, responding to the approaching midnight hour. Her mind was calm now, the anxiety of the long wait replaced by a strange certainty. Whatever happened tonight, success or failure, life or death, it was her path to walk, her destiny to face. They did not lead her to any of the gardens where the purification rituals had taken place, nor to the temple where she and Thorn had met with Lydia 3 nights ago. Instead, they ascended the winding stairs of the highest tower, climbing until they emerged onto a wide circular platform open to the night sky. The ritual space had been prepared with meticulous care. A great circle was inscribed on the stone floor, ancient symbols etched into its circumference, glowing with faint blue light. At the circle's center stood a raised altar of white marble, its surface carved with the phases of the moon. 12 tall torches burned with flames that remained perfectly still, despite the wind that tugged at their cloaks. And there, waiting beside the altar, stood Thorn. He wore no crown, no royal garments. Like Aurora, he was dressed simply in ceremonial white, with a cloak of deepest blue fastened at his shoulders. But there was nothing simple about the power that emanated from him, the barely contained energy of an alpha at the height of his strength. His gray eyes found hers immediately, and even across the distance, she felt the connection between them pulse like a living thing. The priestesses took their positions around the circle, each standing before one of the burning torches. Lydia alone approached the altar, carrying a silver bowl and a ceremonial dagger with a handle of polished moonstone. "Come," she said to Aurora. "The hour approaches." As Aurora stepped into the circle, she felt the energy shift around her, the air becoming charged with ancient power. With each step toward the altar, toward Thorn, the moonstone pendant grew warmer until it seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. When they stood facing each other across the altar, close enough to touch, Thorn's eyes searched her face. "Before we begin," Aurora said softly, "there is something you must know, a truth I learned only hours ago." His expression remained steady, though she sensed his tension. "Speak it." "King Aldrich was not my father," she said, the words difficult despite their necessity. "My mother loved another before her betrothal, a warrior named Alaric. He died protecting her the night she fled." She waited, watching for shock, for rejection. Instead, a look of profound understanding crossed his face. "So that is why my father changed after that night," Thorn said quietly. Not just guilt over her disappearance, but knowledge that the child she carried was not his own. "Does it change things for you?" Aurora asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For the ritual?" Thorn reached across the altar, his hand hovering near her face without touching. "It changes nothing. Your blood is still of the royal line through your mother. Your power is undiminished." His eyes held hers with unwavering intensity, "and my heart is unchanged." The simple declaration settled something deep inside her. With a small nod, she turned to Lydia. "We are ready." The ancient healer raised her hands toward the full moon, now directly overhead. "Then let the ritual begin. As it was in the time of the first wolves, so shall it be now. The bond between Alpha and Pacificadora, freely chosen, freely made." She lowered her hands and began to speak in the old tongue, her voice taking on a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the stones beneath their feet. The other priestesses joined in, their voices weaving together in harmonies that stirred something primal in Aurora's blood. Lydia lifted the silver dagger, its blade catching the moonlight. Blood of the Alpha, blood of the Pacificadora, mingled in the sacred bowl. Through blood we connect, through blood we heal, through blood we bind what was broken. She extended her hand to Thorn, who placed his palm upward on the altar. Without hesitation, Lydia drew the blade across his skin, releasing a thin stream of crimson that flowed into the silver bowl. She then turned to Aurora, who similarly offered her palm. As the dagger parted her skin, Aurora felt no pain, only a strange sense of rightness, of completion beginning. Her blood joined Thorn's in the bowl, swirling together in patterns that seemed to form and reform the ancient symbols inscribed around the circle. Lydia raised the bowl toward the moon, chanting words of power that seemed to hang in the air like visible things. The mingled blood began to glow with the same blue light as the moonstone, brightening until it illuminated their faces from below. "Now," Lydia instructed, "each of you must drink." She offered the bowl first to Thorn, who took it in steady hands. His eyes never left Aurora's as he drank deeply. When he passed the bowl to her, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of energy through Aurora's body. The taste was not what she expected, not metallic or bitter, but sweet and somehow familiar, like water from a mountain spring she had visited in dreams. As the liquid touched her lips, the moonstone flared with blinding light, and suddenly the world around her changed. She was no longer standing on the tower, but in a vast, misty realm where time itself seemed suspended. Across from her stood Thorn, as real as before, but now she could see his essence, a swirling storm of midnight blue and silver, threaded through with black chains that bound his power, his heart, his very soul. The curse made manifest. "I see it now," she whispered. "I see what they did to you." "And I see you," he replied, his voice echoing strangely in this place between worlds. "All of you. Your light, your fear, your courage." Aurora reached out, her hands passing through the chains that bound him, feeling their cold malevolence. They had been crafted with hatred and sealed with innocent blood, a perversion of the natural order designed to isolate the Alpha from the one force that could balance his power. "These chains were forged by blood magic," she said, knowledge flowing into her mind from a source beyond herself, the collective wisdom of all Pacificadoras who had come before. "They can only be broken by a greater magic, by love freely given, by sacrifice freely made." "What must we do?" Thorn asked, his essence straining toward hers despite the chains. In answer, Aurora felt words rising to her lips, ancient words in the old tongue that she somehow knew, though she had never learned them.
"By moon and blood, by heart and soul, I claim you," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "What darkness bound, let light release. What hatred forged, let love unmake." As she spoke, her essence began to glow more intensely, golden light with threads of blue reaching out toward his midnight storm. Where they touched, the black chains hissed and smoked, recoiling from her light. The curse fought back. The chains tightened around Thorn's essence, and he gasped in pain. Dark tendrils lashed out toward Aurora, seeking to bind her as well, to drag her down into the same isolation. "It's trying to take you too," Thorn warned, struggling against the constricting chains. "Aurora, be careful." But she was beyond caution now. Her power flowed freely, the moonstone channeling energy through her in waves that grew stronger with each heartbeat. She pressed forward, her light enveloping him, surrounding the chains, seeking their weakest points. "I am Aurora, daughter of Cassandra, heir to the Moonstone legacy," she declared. "By the power of my bloodline, by the strength of my heart, I break these chains. I set you free." The dark tendrils recoiled from her voice, but quickly regrouped, attacking with renewed fury. Aurora felt them trying to penetrate her defenses, to find purchase in her fears, her doubts. They whispered in her mind, promising power if she would only turn away, leave him bound, claim his kingdom for herself. "Do not listen," Thorn urged, his voice strained. "It lies. It always lies." Aurora focused on his voice, on the connection between them that had been growing since that first meeting in the village square. 3 days of purification rituals had strengthened their bond, but the foundation had been laid the moment their eyes met. Recognition, belonging, home. "The final binding requires a kiss freely given," she said, remembering the prophecy, "a joining of souls through physical union." Even in this spiritual realm, she could feel her body on the tower, feel Lydia guiding her hands to meet Thorn's across the altar. The priestess's chanting grew more intense, the energy building around them like a gathering storm. "If we do this, there's no going back," Thorn warned, his essence reaching for hers despite his words. "The bond will be permanent. If I die, you may follow. If you die—" "I choose this," Aurora interrupted. "I choose you. Free of coercion, free of fate, free of prophecy. I choose." In the physical world, she felt herself leaning across the altar, felt Thorn's hands clasping hers, the cut on her palm pressed against his, their blood mingling once more. Around them, the circle blazed with blue fire that harmed no one, reaching upward toward the moon in 12 pillars of light. Their lips met, and worlds collided. The kiss that should have been gentle ignited like wildfire, burning away all barriers between them. Aurora felt herself falling into him, her essence merging with his, light and storm becoming something new, something whole. The black chains shattered with a sound like thunder, fragments dissolving into nothing as the curse broke. In that moment of perfect union, Aurora saw everything: Thorn's childhood memories of a distant father and absent mother, the loneliness of kingship, the isolation of the cursed years. And he saw her, the orphan child raised by a healer, the outcast yearning for belonging, the woman discovering her power and purpose. No secrets, no barriers, complete truth. Through their joined hands, through their connected lips, through their merging souls, power flowed and built and transformed. The moonstone blazed so brightly it outshone the torches, the stars, nearly rivaling the moon itself. Its light spread outward in concentric circles, passing through the priestesses, through the tower stones, expanding beyond the fortress walls to wash over the land in waves of cleansing energy. Somewhere distant, Aurora heard screams. The blood hunters caught in the open, their dark magic turned against them by the purifying light. She felt the ancient pathways they had used for generations closing, sealing shut under the pressure of her power, joined with Thorn's freed strength. And then, abruptly, something went wrong. A dark presence entered the circle, a taint in the perfect communion they had created. Aurora felt it like poison in her veins, a cold malevolence seeking the heart of their connection.
Celine. Somehow, the Bloodhunter leader had breached the fortress defenses, had climbed the tower unseen, had slipped past the priestesses focused on channeling the ritual energy. "No!" The scream tore from Aurora's throat as she felt Celine's dagger plunge toward Thorn's unprotected back. Without conscious thought, Aurora moved. Still connected to Thorn through their clasped hands, through the kiss that had not yet broken, she twisted, placing her own body between him and the descending blade. Time slowed to a crawl. Aurora saw Celine's face, contorted with hatred and desperate fear, fear of a world without the dark power she had served, fear of a future where bloodhunters could no longer feed on pain and discord. The dagger in her hand was ancient, its black blade absorbing rather than reflecting the brilliant light around them. A sacrificial knife designed to kill Pacificadorus. As the blade plunged into Aurora's back, piercing through to her heart, the prophecy's words echoed in her mind. The price of power is life itself. This was the sacrifice foretold, her life freely given to close the pathways forever. Aurora's knees buckled, but Thorn caught her, breaking the kiss at last, to look into her eyes with dawning horror. Around them, chaos erupted. The priestesses converged on Celine, their combined power driving her back. Guards poured onto the tower platform, alerted too late by the scream. But Aurora saw only Thorn's face, felt only his arms supporting her as strength drained from her body with each beat of her pierced heart. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Aurora, no. Stay with me." She tried to smile, tasting blood on her lips. "The ritual. Is it complete?" Lydia knelt beside them, her weathered face grave as she examined the wound. "The pathways are closed. The curse is broken. But the price—" "Worth it," Aurora whispered. "To free you. To save our people." Thorn's face contorted with grief and rage. "This was not the sacrifice I would have accepted. Not your life. Never your life." The bond between them, newly forged and already so strong, thrummed with his pain. Aurora could feel his desperation, his frantic search for a solution. But the black blade had been crafted specifically for this purpose, to kill what could not otherwise be killed, to end a Pacificadora's life when at the height of her power. "The blood bond," Lydia said suddenly, her eyes widening with realization. "It's still active. The connection is complete." "What do you mean?" Thorn demanded, still cradling Aurora as her breathing grew shallower. "Your life forces are joined now. Your strength can sustain her, can heal her. If—" Lydia hesitated, her expression grave. "If you're willing to share her fate, to tie your life to hers so completely that if she dies, you die. If she lives, you live, but forever bound, two halves of a single soul." "Do it," Thorn said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." "Wait," Aurora managed, her voice fading. "The kingdom needs you. The people need you." His eyes, now shining with unshed tears, held hers with fierce determination. "The kingdom needs us both, and I need you, not because of prophecy or fate or bloodlines, but because you are Aurora and I am Thorn, and together we are more than either of us could be alone." He looked to Lydia. "Tell me what to do." The ancient healer placed her hands over the wound in Aurora's back, her fingers coming away crimson. "Place your hand over her heart. Give her your strength, your life, your very essence. But understand, this cannot be undone. Ever." Thorn positioned his palm over Aurora's heart, his other arm still supporting her. "I choose this," he said, echoing her earlier words. "I choose you." As his hand pressed against her chest, Aurora felt warmth spreading through her failing body. The bond between them, already strong, became something beyond understanding, a connection so profound that the boundaries between them blurred completely. His strength flowed into her, his life force merged with hers. The wound in her heart began to close, cells regenerating at impossible speed as his alpha vitality combined with her Pacificadora resilience.
Around them, the ritual circle pulsed with renewed energy, the 12 flames leaping higher. The priestesses resumed their chanting, guiding and containing the wild power unleashed by this unprecedented bonding. Aurora gasped as sensation returned to her limbs, as the cold numbness of approaching death receded. Her vision, which had begun to darken at the edges, cleared. She could feel Thorn's heartbeat as if it were her own, because now, in a very real sense, it was. "It's working," Lydia whispered in awe. "The healing takes hold." Celine, restrained by the guards but still conscious, screamed in frustrated rage. "You fools! Do you know what you've done? The balance is restored." Thorn cut her off, his voice resonating with new power. As it was always meant to be, Alpha and Pacificadora, strength and compassion, power and wisdom, 2 halves of a single whole. As Aurora's strength returned, she sat up slowly, still held within the circle of Thorn's arms. The wound in her back had closed completely, leaving only a scar in the shape of a crescent moon, a permanent reminder of how close she had come to death. But something else had changed too. As she looked within herself, Aurora realized she could sense her wolf more strongly than ever before. Not the weak, submissive presence she had always known, but something powerful and confident, mirroring the alpha strength that now flowed in her veins. "I can feel my wolf," she whispered in wonder. "Fully, completely." "And I can feel my humanity more clearly than ever," Thorn replied, his eyes showing the same amazement. The rage that always simmered beneath the surface, the cold calculation, the curse forced upon me, it's balanced now. Lydia helped them both to their feet, her expression one of reverence mixed with scientific curiosity. The legend spoke of the potential for such a bond, but it has never been documented. You are truly 2 halves of a single soul now. The ritual circle's energy was fading, the flames returning to normal height, the glowing symbols dimming. Dawn approached, the first pale light appearing on the eastern horizon. The full moon was setting, its work complete. Aurora turned to face Celine, still held firmly by the guards. The blood hunter's face showed defeat mixed with defiance. "What will you do with me?" she demanded. "Kill me like you killed the others?" "We killed no one," Aurora replied. "Those blood hunters who died chose death over redemption. They could not survive in a world without dark magic to sustain them." She studied the ancient enemy who had very nearly ended her life. "But you could choose differently." Thorn tensed beside her, his protectiveness flowing through their bond. "She tried to kill you." "And failed," Aurora replied. "Now we have a choice. Continue the cycle of vengeance that has plagued the 5 clans for generations, or break it. Begin something new." She approached Celine carefully, feeling Thorn's anxiety through their connection, but also his trust in her judgment. The blood hunter leader glared with hatred, but Aurora saw beyond it now, saw the fear, the desperate clinging to a power that had defined her for centuries. "The old ways are gone," Aurora said gently. "The pathways are closed. But that doesn't mean you must end with them. There is another path." She placed her palm against Celine's forehead. The moonstone flared once more, its light gentler now, but no less potent. Through their contact, Aurora could sense the corruption that had twisted Celine's soul over long centuries. Not innate evil, but a gradual poisoning by the dark power she had channeled. "I offer you cleansing," Aurora said. "Not death, but rebirth. The choice is yours." For a long moment, Celine's face showed only hatred. Then slowly, something changed in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even longing for release from the darkness that had consumed her. "Do it," she whispered hoarsely. "End this." Aurora closed her eyes, drawing on the combined power she now shared with Thorn. Through their bond, she channeled healing energy, not the violent purification that had struck down the blood hunters at Black River Crossing, but a gentle, persistent light that sought the original soul beneath centuries of corruption. Celine gasped, her body arching as the purification took hold. The unnatural red of her hair faded to natural auburn, the inhuman green of her eyes softening to hazel.
The ritual markings etched into her skin dissolved like mist under morning sun. When it was done, she slumped in the guard's grasp, exhausted but transformed. Looking up at Aurora with clear eyes, she spoke in a voice that sounded younger, unburdened. "I remember now, before the darkness, before the blood." A single tear traced down her cheek. "What happens now?" "Justice," Thorn answered firmly, "for your crimes, but not vengeance." As the sun crested the eastern mountains, bathing the ritual platform in golden light, Aurora turned to face the kingdom spread out below them. From this height, she could see for miles in every direction: forests, villages, rivers, all part of the realm she had never known was her birthright. Thorn stood beside her, their shoulders touching, their newly forged bond humming with shared purpose. Through it, she could feel his thoughts, his emotions, his unwavering commitment to the path they would now walk together. "What do you see?" he asked quietly. "A new beginning," she replied. "For the 5 clans, for us, for everyone." The priestesses approached, led by Lydia, who carried a silver circlet set with the royal emblem of the northern clan. "The council awaits below," she said. "They've been in session all night, as reports came in of blood hunters falling throughout the kingdom, of dark magic fading, of ancient wounds beginning to heal." She offered the circlet to Aurora with a deep bow. "They are ready to acknowledge their queen." Aurora accepted the circlet, feeling its weight, the weight of responsibility, of legacy, of the future now opening before her. But she was not alone in bearing it. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's strength supporting her, just as her compassion now tempered his power. "Together," she said, taking his hand. "We do this together." As they descended the tower stairs to face the council, to begin the work of healing a kingdom long divided, Aurora felt a presence, fleeting but unmistakable. A woman with silver hair and golden eyes, watching with pride from just beyond the veil that separated worlds. Mother. The fortress came alive around them, the news spreading like wildfire through corridors and courtyards, the curse broken, the blood hunters defeated, the lost Pacificadora returned and bonded to their king in a union unprecedented in their history. The dawn of a new era had broken over the northern clan, bright with possibility and hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, they would face them as the prophecy had foretold. 2 halves of a single soul, Alpha and Omega, strength and compassion united at last. Thorn's voice came through their bond, meant for her alone. Not words exactly, but a feeling, a promise, a certainty. Forever. And Aurora's answer, flowing back to him along the same unbreakable connection. Forever.